All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. How you doing today, sir? Your mic's muted, FYI. It's on StreamYard.
Forgive me, I muted when we were on backstage, and
okay.
I forgot to unmute. Jay Dyer says, "Unmute." Father Deacon Ananias, unmute.
I should have done that.
Always a pleasure to be with you, dear brother. And
no, today's going to be fun, man. And I want to say for all the fellas out there, this is going to be, this is basically a night with the boys, just talking philosophy. And so if you'd like, pour yourself a couple fingers, sit back. We're going to be going from the ancient period to the modern. And we're going to be really focusing on contemporary philosophy and kind of where the errors are. And so the posing question that I put in the title for today's stream is academic philosophy dead? And I put a document together we're going to kind of riff off of as we go through today's stream. But before we even get into the document, I think we should already just go ahead and answer the question. Father Deacon Doctor, do you feel like academic philosophy is dead? You hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you. You're just coming a little broken. 1 second. Let me see if I can close down some stuff, if you don't mind, just to see if we can get better.
Sorry, guys. We got to deal with some boomer tech issues. Rural Montana internet. Yeah.
Rural. Hold on. I was just waiting for my dial-up. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I thought I heard that in the background.
Is it? Let me guess. I didn't even hear it. Let me guess what the question is. Is it, as a professor, do I believe that academia is dead? Did I get that right? Hold on.
That's essentially what I'm going at. It is the field of profession that you are involved in. Is it coming to a screeching halt?
There's an end in sight. I just don't know how close. Just like with contemporary kind of society, just when you think you're like, well, this has got to be the end. There's no way. I thought 2020 was going to be like, well, this is it. We're all living in pods to get ready. And you're always kind of surprised. Academia is kind of like that too. I thought, obviously, I believe the model's kind of not sustainable in the ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a very good predictor of exactly when that's going to end. So I probably, I've been as a professor for what? I think the first time I started teaching in the university was probably 2005. And then I went back for my PhD and then came back in 2012. January 2012 to teach. Even back that, it just seems to keep going. Do you kind of get that feeling too, like with stuff in the world, that it's like, man, this is going to end real quick? And the kind of resilience or durability despite the kind of problems kind of always surprises me. But I think we can all agree, and we'll get into the details of why exactly this is the case, that it's not a sustainable model. It is collapsing. So you are correct. How fast and when the end is, I don't know. I can't tell you that.
Well, and then that's kind of to clarify what my running theory is. So to the question, is academic philosophy dead? I would say yes, the modernist project is coming to an end. And so am I arguing that being a professional philosopher is ending? Absolutely not. That's not what I mean. And actually, what I would say in regard to this, and this is my running thesis that I have in my book regarding the pre-modern and the modern, that all of Western Christianity has now adopted modern presuppositions. And only Orthodoxy sort of offers the pre-modern alternative that allows for mystery and a focus on a holding of traditional metaphysics and a focusing on being, and therefore philosophy leading towards theosis, if you want to even use that, even though philosophy, theology, different categories. But my point is, it led to an actual ontological transformation of the individual. I mean, you find this in Plato, you find this in Aristotle, and this is part of the basis of ancient philosophy. And then within the church, we sort of take the rationality and the faith elements, Athens and Jerusalem. Promotion of our conference, by the way. Sign up if you haven't signed up. FDA, myself, Metropolitan Jonah, Father Vladimir, and DJ Dyer will be all together in California, in Florida. And I will get that link and I'm going to post it in the chat. So if you guys haven't signed up, if you're in the South,
please.
Or you're able, go ahead.
Please don't buy tickets to actual Athens and Jerusalem. It's actually in Florida. Palm Beach. Palm Coast. Yeah, forgive me. Palm Coast. It's St. Nicholas Church. And both. We're all looking forward to it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously we were just talking about this stream is kind of, dealing with this and kind of in some way kind of preparing you for the good things to come at the conference.
Right. And I'm going to share this link right here for anybody who's interested in the chat. This is the conference that we're going to be at. It's going to be basically an Orthodox academic conference with people that you're going to be familiar with. And the larger point that I was making in regards to how the church brought Athens and Jerusalem together is that it brought reason and faith together for a transcendent mystery. And as we go through today and look at the trends of the different periods and schools of philosophy, we're going to see a movement towards sort of the separation between faith and reason, an elevation of reason, and eventually a whole doing away with the mystical, the super rational, and a focus on individual experience. And so part of the postmodern response to modernity is because there is no valuation for personal subjective experience in the modernist project. Now, the postmodernists are going way too far in the extreme where they become nominal and deny all universals and meta truths and all this different stuff. But there is a legitimate critique there that I want to get into with you, with somebody like Christos Yanaros, who is highlighting that Orthodoxy is pre-modern, and therefore we're not postmodern in the sense of everything that comes with that, but we do hold individual experience, especially that which is in relation to God, that synergy, theosis, in a very high regard that modernity has rejected, but we still maintain the traditional metaphysics, and we still have transcendent meaning, and we can still participate in science. And so he viewed the postmodern turn as an invitation towards orthodoxy, and he thought orthodoxy was going to spread in the West because of this. And so is academic philosophy dead? I would say yes, in the sense of the modernist project, that they're salvaging to the very best they can do right now, because the problem with modern philosophy is that it's undermined the foundation that it stood on. And therefore, it really has nowhere to go. It's a cul-de-sac. It's a dead end. And if, as I've seen at some places, like I'm not a Thomist and I don't support Thomism, but I have seen a resurgence in theories regarding person and brain, person and neuroscience, theories of hylomorphism. And this is really a return back to something older, because it posits that there's actually a soul that gives form to matter, a la Aristotle. But as Father Deacon has spoke about on this channel, we as Orthodox Christians have something that's hylomorphic in how we understand the relationship between the soul and the body. And so the fact that contemporary philosophy, or at least is trying to pull some of these strings that have existed in previous times, I would say that's a movement in the right direction. and that the only resurgence of philosophy is going to have to be a sort of return to a pre-modern worldview or pre-modern foundation, where we, through skepticism, we haven't undermined all the things that are needed to even do philosophy. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Well, it's interesting because you look at like different kind of movements and thoughts and stuff like that, and there's certain goods in there. So, I have to recommend, I'll probably talk about it in the conference. One of my late mentors, Dr. Tristan Engelhardt, After God, really kind of goes into this kind of analyzing what the modern project is. So modernity, the reason why he calls it After God is that modernity was a rejection of Christianity and the Christian values, and postmodernity takes a step further and goes after God. Mm-hmm. So if you contrast the kind of two movements, there's this interesting kind of optimism of the Enlightenment and modernity, of this kind of humanism, even kind of both secular and Christian kind of humanism, and that will have this truly kind of Catholic in the sense of universal kind of morality and philosophy. I mean, you see this with Descartes, right? Mm-hmm. There'll be something that'll be binding universally and intellectually upon all man. And the Enlightenment kind of carries this kind of project out. It'll save, in terms of kind of like politics and stuff, it'll save man from the wars. It'll bind us all together and the religions. It really is kind of an ecumenist kind of movement. So there's, it's no coincidence that ecumenism kind of does come out of these kind of movements. And what we see with modernity is an utter failure.
Right.
It brought about the 20th century. It's like the bloodiest.
Right. And the irony is, to your point, modernity is based on a sort of utopianism. So that ecumenism itself is built on this presupposition of utopianism, that somehow we can nullify the differences. We can just all agree on some basic tenets and everything's going to be wonderful. Not the case. And that to the point you're making, the irony is this modernist project that was built on rationalism, democracy, scientism, technological progress, and individualism. Those are what I call the 5 pillars of modernity. That project that is going to lead towards utopia has totally failed. I mean, it failed by the mid half of the 20th century. And so now we live in a space in which the structures and the institutions, the powers that be, are not going to change the project. And this is deeper than just the philosophy. This is economics. This is geopolitics. This is everything. Mm-hmm. The entire infrastructure is moving in this direction. And so the existential angst that people feel due to the economy or the fiat dollar, this is all part of modernity. So we don't think, when we're talking about modernity in a philosophical sense, or you think, oh, your guys are talking about, Bentham and John Stuart Mill. No. Yes, but we're talking about the water that we swim in. And that's everything about our lives. That is part of modernity. And that project has undermined itself. And you can see the irony in how the project has undermined itself when you see LGBTQ supporters of Islamic immigrants. Like, the system is just hitting itself and it makes no sense. It's just total contradictions. Because even
Go ahead. Well, then you usher in postmodernity, which is historical. They're correct about certain stuff. I think that's what you pointed out. But the problem is, yes, they don't have a framework. So even the kind of words that they mean, it's like there's something true about that, but they don't have the kind of the whole mosaic and picture how to integrate that. And worse yet, postmodernity even realizes that there is no mosaic. It's completely fragmented. And so it's really kind of interesting that God leaves kind of clues even in outside of orthodoxy that the system's broken, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not simply like you've got to convert to orthodoxy to see the truth. God speaks outside of orthodoxy. And I really see that in postmodernity. I think that Unaris is that's kind of his thesis, is that those things that you're seeing, they're correct, but you have no way to piece it back together. You have no way to kind of make like sense of that kind of intuition and what that word means until you bring it back into the whole. So you realize that it's broken and fragmented, and there's kind of a meaninglessness, right? And that's something good. It reminds me a little bit about the Zoomers generation. They're right. They see something. They see that. I mean, they're a classic example of like something postmodern. You see it's all broken. Good. Because the previous generations don't. They're normies. You see it, but notice they don't know how to reconstruct it. They don't know how to put it back together again. And oftentimes the danger, and I think you see this in postmodernity, is it just becomes reactionary and overreactionary. And so your question about, and the way you titled, is academic philosophy dead? My question to academic philosophy is, to what end? What is like, where are you going? Where did you come from? They can't answer those questions. And if you can't answer your question of where you came from and where you're going, you're dead. That's a really kind of sobering point, isn't it?
Yeah. So they have no answers, to your point.
Yeah, you need to. And I realize this, I don't want to get too personal, but when I was going through the very worst of my life in my PhD program, when my wife was suffering and torment and we were in the worst pain and isolation, I went to my professors, because those are the guys that are supposed to have the answers, right? They're the sages. They're the oracle. And I'm like, I want to blow my brains out. What do you have to say about it? Let's just get down to it, right? And Camus' question, that really, Camus hit it. That's the most profound question that could be asked, is, should I commit suicide? And they couldn't answer. And I'm like, and I had a breakthrough, and I'm like, exactly. That's how I knew philosophy was dead. If you cannot reach, because I was broken, right? I was excommunicated from my own being as a human being, right? Who I am. Like, what is your stupid system and philosophy is going to do if you can't, as the late Metropolitan Anthony Bloom says, if a philosophy can't reach man in his deepest point of suffering, like, it's meaningless.
Right.
And that was a breakthrough for me. And I think for all of you, that's an insight into answering the question, is academic philosophy dead? Who are you? What is your end? And when you're in suffering, what are these stupid abstract systems going to do? And my professors were in silence. And I'm like, there it is. That was an amazing insight for me. I'm like, it's dead.
I would make the argument that Nietzsche is the first contemporary philosopher.
Yes.
And his proclamation that God is dead has led to the nihilism that plagues our society. And to your point, I don't really know of any modern philosophical school that you could go, if you were really suffering in life, that you could go read and like really be inspired to persevere and become something better. I mean, most of it it's dull. It's sometimes filled with jargon. It's not even trying to, it's like a word game in and of itself. It's like a Wittgensteinian word game. It's really not about reaching the soul of man, because it denies that there's even an ontological transcendent dimension to man himself. And that's why I think that it is dead. But the only way it remerges is to unify itself back with logos, right? That's how philosophy began, was moving from mythology to logos. And that's where I would argue the reason side and then the prophetic faith side of the Jewish tradition are two different strands that God sort of used in history to move towards the revelation of who his son is once he incarnated. But now you have philosophy that's totally divorced from logos. It has no has no ethics, it has no metaphysics, and epistemology is really just a power language game that they're all playing. There is no unifying epistemology. There, all the presuppositions are dead, and so it really is a dog eat dog world. And how can you do like that? It's just not a landscape that even is conducive towards true philosophical inquiry and even moving the boundaries forward. I mean, you look at the philosophy of mind. I always bring this up. They've been stuck on the hard problem of consciousness since the 80s. They've made zero progress. And they think that new scientific tools or AI is somehow going to solve, their inability to define what consciousness is. No, the problem is the system itself. The problem is modernity.
Yeah, I just shared Hubert Dreyfus. Great. Go ahead. Sorry, I had a lag.
No, I didn't say anything. Go ahead.
The closest philosophy probably deals with this is existentialism.
Yeah.
But I noticed something interesting. So they talk about it, but I want all of you to consider, are people who commit to existentialist philosophy, is their lives getting better? Like, is it making them? So I know they're talking about it, but it's still a modern philosophy. And I'm going to reference another dear colleague of mine, Dr. Bruce Seraphim Fultz, who's going to be one of the speakers for Montanica Conference. He's a leading Heideggerian scholar and philosopher, and he coined a term, abstractionism. So ironically enough, the existentialist wants to talk about the kind of immediate experience. I mean, they speak in kind of an orthodox way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I started wondering, I'm like, but why doesn't it heal? Why doesn't it put things together? It's still stuck in the modernist philosophy of abstractionism. And we'll probably go through tonight various kind of main themes and tenets of modernity, but I thought that was an excellent kind of essential feature of modernity, abstraction. So even if you talk about, the individual and the person and the existential, quality of and establishing meaning in that, it's like, yeah, but what is it? That's all still abstract talk.
Right.
If I'm not producing what you're saying, like, again, what do you have to say? Like, how do you heal people? How do you reconstitute man once he's fragmented and broken and wants to die and is leading? And, one of the closest Orthodox Western philosophers that's not Orthodox is Kierkegaard, sickness unto death. We're all running. You want to talk about the academic philosophy being dead? That's it. What a great phrase to summarize.
And within his historical context, he kind of already saw what we're talking about. He saw that this transition away from faith is going to be essentially a dead end. And it is a sickness unto death. And that's exactly what's occurred.
We're like spiritually, physically.
Right. The people are dying, overweight, like all the institution. I mean, every institution does the opposite of what you think. And the nations themselves are committing suicide through mass immigration because there's nothing to stand on. There's no identity. Nationalism itself is even though it is part of modernity, nationalism has always typically been tied with a monarchy. And after World War I, that was the death of the old world. That was the death of the pre-modern European world. And we're all now forced to participate in democracy as the only option. And if you're against democracy, well, then what are you? You're a Nazi. You're a communist. There's some type of pejorative to label you as. But we don't realize how transitionary the 19th century was from moving out of the Industrial Revolution, moving out of a pre-modern, although the foundations of modernity already started, into a full-blown modernist world that we live in now and inhabit. there's so many things that are incorporated into this. And that's why I think paganism and Orthodoxy and trad Catholicism are on the rise, because they're pre-modern. Now, I'm not in favor of paganism, but if you are an angsty right-winger and you're trying to escape modernity, where you can't talk about race, you can't talk about nationality, you can't talk about differences between groups of peoples, obviously from a non-Christian world, okay, they want to venerate Odin again and some of the Nordic gods. What are they doing? They're just trying to return back to something pre-modern. And I think just like history, just like our society, just like what we're doing individually by becoming Orthodox, that's what philosophy has to do, is it has to make a U-turn from the last 300 years and move back into a pre-modern basis so that we can move forward.
Remember Father Josiah's line to Tucker Carlson recently? He's like, people say that our contemporary modern society is pagan. He's like, that's an insult to the pagan.
Yeah, that's an insult to paganism.
We're worse. They have these kind of notions of I love that line. It's so great. It's like, well, they were better. Like, you know, even if they were worshiping demons, like they still had a notion of a hierarchical, you know, created order of being,
right,
and gods and these kinds of things that are
pre-modern values. You know, we would philosophically or theologically criticize how those would be justified in a sort of geolocational specific historical context regarding paganism and their gods. But at least what they're doing is, like you said, a hierarchy of order, of authority. They're not, it's not just total chaos. Now, maybe there's sentiments, especially regarding supremacy ideals around race, that is, I think, too far. And because they don't have a basis to understand how do all of us, what is the foundation of humanity and how are we all united? Well, it's Christ.
And so I was even thinking when we were talking earlier, even when existentialists and Kierkegaard, Camus get certain stuff right, people in postmodernity, the reason why it doesn't heal, it doesn't do anything, is because it's outside of the kataholos. The kataholos, the church's life, they're just words. So it's like, you're correct, but they don't give life. They don't heal. And that's why we want to bring those things in that they're noticing. Like, I think Yanaris is saying this, bring them into Orthodoxy. Like, you've got it. Like, there's something correct in your analysis and critique, but that's not going to do it because it's still in the abstract. The incarnation is to plug into the one who is life himself, who conquered death and brought life to, otherwise they're just words.
Right.
And I think that's really important. So it's like, they got it right, but it's not going to do anything. So even if academic philosophy went philosophically the right direction, what is it going to do? It's never going to be true gnosis and true philosophy, because true philosophy, philosophia, is philotheos.
Yes.
Love of God. And unless you're connected to the life source itself, it's death. It will lead to death. Like, that's it.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And that's really one of the opportunities we have right now, that because modernity, and I would argue, if you're going to jump on board with modernity, or say, you know, right now, maybe you're an American boomer who is not totally dissatisfied with the state of things and thinks that you're going to vote your way out of this. The logical end is that you're eventually going to agree to transhumanism. I believe that transhumanism is the only out for the modernist project. Now, I think it's doomed to failure. I don't think it's possible, but I think that's why, you know, just like Israel's in a quarter and they're doing everything they can for the Greater Israel Project, I feel like the same things with the technocratic center of modernity. And this is where the money is. This is where the billionaires are. This is where the promises of immortality and omniscience and again, worldly utopia. Transhumanism is utopianistic, just as modernity is utopianistic, because it really is the endpoint of individualism, rationalism, democracy, scientism, and technological progress. It leads towards the singularity.
It's interesting that AI is basically an amalgamation of all these different things. Doesn't it make kind of sense that it leads to this kind of idea, the singularity, that it's pulling from like all these kinds of, it's parasitic. And in some sense, that's why it's kind of demonic. I'm not saying like nobody should ever use AI or something like that, but you have to contextualize it within the overall kind of movement, that it's not life in itself. It imitates. And it only has a life insofar as it's parasitic and vampiric upon the things that actually exist in ideas. And I actually kind of find that interesting. Mm-hmm. But like we said, it's not life itself, so it'll never give life and it'll end in death.
Right.
Socially, politically, philosophically, spiritually. And so anyways, it just thought just came to me about that.
Yeah.
That it's pulling from all these kind of...
and I would argue that what it is essentially an inversion of Christian eschatology. I mean, the resurrection of the dead, living forever, communing with a omniscient being, which will then also be yourself, but you'll be hooked up to the source of it. I mean, this is a technologized, materialized form of Christian eschatology. And the irony is, even though modernity and transhumanism, secularism, all these things try to run away from God, what they do is just mimic itself. It's like you are what you hate. And like they just like demonically mimic Christianity back to the world in new terms.
And Nietzsche predicted that too. If you kill God, you can't kill God. You will simply create a new God. That's what he was saying. Is that you kill the old God, the future generations, then I mean, what a tremendous burden, he says, that we've killed God. Where's up and down? Where's left and right? He realizes that objectivity and morality and all these things are gone. And he says that's such a tremendous, fearsome deicide and act that you will have to make yourself gods or erect a god or something like that too. And so he's philosophically a prophet and saying, here's what's coming. And that's exactly, as you so eloquently put, what the kind of technocratic age has kind of produced is its own kind of God and inverted Christianity, because it's like that's the only thing can be done,
right? And that's like the demonic presupposition to get you to fall into, while you'll augment yourself, is that so many people already worship themselves. I mean, even it could be your interpretation of the Bible, it could be a secularist atheist, it could be a new age hedonist. The uniting factor amongst all these groups, and why I think they're going to be so susceptible towards total augmentation and transhumanism, is the modernist project is falling apart. This is my perspective. Transhumanism is the only saving light for the people who are still supporting it and believing that we just need to keep, like, we're almost to the threshold. Like it's it's just turbulent right now because it's right before the point of transcendence. But all these people are going to adopt this augmentation, and they're going to fall for the fake God because they already worship themselves. And for true recognition, I mean, Paul talks about this in the epistles about, the wisdom of man. It's hubris, it's pride, and that humility is the only thing that actually sets you on a foundation for true wisdom. But that is a recognition of, as you talked about, the hierarchy of authority, which begins with God. And so once your conceptual framework for authority and the transcendent are in place, I think now you can actually begin to perceive things as they actually are. And that so many people have been duped. They don't realize that their consumerism, their hedonism, their sexual fetishes. These are all things that are part of this contemporary period. And all these factors are dulling your news so that you're moving towards the trap. Whether you right now, you're like, oh, I'm never going to do digital currency. I guarantee you will.
Do you want to,
yeah, we want to get into that. We had a quick question specifically for you if you want to answer, and then we'll get into the document here. Major thank you to David James Flood, been a member, COTEL crew member for 9 months, says, I knew academic philosophy was cooked 15 years ago, and my body told me the prompt on one of his philosophy classes was, do mountains have rights? Yeah, pretty much. And then Tanner G had a specific question. Oh, you want to say something?
Yeah, I had an experience like that probably 20 years ago. So, you know, I did my grad school work at one of the leading schools in phenomenology. And so I was always hearing about conferences about like phenomenology. And I kid you not, there was a conference that came up called the Phenomenology of Garbage. And I was like, that's it. That's it. That's the end of the world. Literally doing philosophy conferences on garbage. So anyways, a similar sentiment.
Tanner G had a specific question. It's more of a spiritual question. So it's kind of off topic. Then we'll dive back into the philosophy stuff. Thank you, Tanner, for the generous $20. He says, for FDA, me and my fiance have been together for 4 years. We are planning on getting married mid next year. However, we just decided to begin catechism. Would it make sense for us to ask a priest for slightly faster catechism or wait and go through normal speed? We want to get started on beginning a family soon. I think I already know your answer, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, you bring up you don't have to be scared to talk to your priest about what your thoughts are, like what your plans are. I am planning on getting married with this girl. I know I'm in catechesis. How does that work out? And he'll guide you through like in the best way possible, and just, you know, kind of put your faith in him. But you know, he can't give you a good prescription unless you talk to him about all your kind of concerns and where you're at. So just talk to your priest about it.
Yep. And thank you so much, Marilyn, threw in $10. No comment. God bless you, sister. Okay, so now I want to riff a little bit with you on a broad topic, the entirety of intellectual history. So
buckle down, everybody. We're going through the whole history of Western civilization and philosophy.
Yeah. So I tried to make the most abbreviated document I could for us to kind of riff off of. And I asked FDA if he thought it'd be useful. And so these are the most brief, general bullet points on different, essentially the ways in which we demarcate intellectual history. And I want to talk about this because, and we're not going to spend too much time on it, but the goal is to sort of set a foundation to understand what is modern philosophy. You've already heard us criticize where we think it's at, where its problems are. But I think what so many people, just like I've talked about, so many people don't know history. You know, you ask them, okay, name a major event that happened in the 1400s or the 800s. They have no idea about anything. But the same is true with intellectual history. You may know of the names. You may have heard of Plato and Aristotle or Aquinas. But how many people actually understand the trajectory of thought and how we got to the present point? So that's what our goal is today. It's kind of a big task, but I think FDA is up for it. We did like the most all-encompassing discussion on metaphysics I think I've seen online. It's like 4 hours just talking about metaphysics. So I thought, what better way to follow that stream up with a discussion on the entirety of Western civilization and intellectual history. So to begin, I broke down the ancient period in basically 3 sections. And my goal here is to demonstrate like what are the transitionary points in thought. And so the birth of philosophy, we're not getting into Parmenides and Heraclitus and Pythagoras, but in Thales, what is going on at this point? It's a move from mythos to logos. It's a move from mythological description of reality to a sort of rational apprehension of reality, beginning most specifically with what is the first principle and what is being. And this is what, if you take any intro into metaphysics, you begin with Parmenides, you begin with Thales, you begin with Heraclitus, because these are the foundational questions of what is the thing that's unchanging in physical reality.
Can I make a comment real quick on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Always jump in. If you have any comment, dude, just stop me.
So mythos and where we get myth from is not simply, I mean, literally translates story, but you have to understand that what that entails is that within the age of the myth, there was no individual. Everything was determined and fated. So was it deterministic? It was, there was no concept of the I or the self. So you weren't separated from the determined world. So what Dr. David Patrick is saying is that that switch is a break from the myth, that one is able to perceive logos and see and start asking questions, just like Heidegger said, the only being in whom being is a question is the Dasein, is the you.
Right.
That's, and Heidegger himself was getting back to the kind of pre-Socratics, like what they were thinking. That is literally a break from the myth, that the being in whom being is a question is no longer determined. They're a self that can actually contemplate these kinds of first principles. That is the beginning of philosophy. That is the beginning of self. I'm not simply determined by the fates and the gods and stuff like that. I'm actually distinct. And there is a rational principle by which I can actually inquire, because I'm a real self. I'm not determined. So, I mean, part of that is that knowledge is only possible and logos is only possible if you're not determined, if there's a real self. And so that's a remarkable move right there.
Yeah. And to Father's point, this is a major transition in thought from what we consider the mythos time before rational inquiry, before abstract reasoning, and contemplating that the cosmos actually is a coherent, ordered, rational process that maybe we can actually understand. So this is a huge transition in the understanding of the self and how we come to knowledge. And I would argue that the second period, and maybe, feel free if you have any disagreements. This is just a general thought process that I laid out. But Socrates, what makes him so pivotal is he then transitions from cosmology to anthropology. The focus moves from, metaphysics. What is the foundational principle of the universe? Fire, water, air, to actually the whole point is actually a return to soul and virtue. And so this is where then he is contrasted with what we refer to as the pre-Socratics. The pre-Socratics are more focused on metaphysics. Socrates is more focused on ethics and virtue. And this leads to the birth, what I would say is moral philosophy and dialectic as a method. And then this leads into Plato and Aristotle systematizing and bringing together the metaphysics and the ethics and how these things actually function together. So I say Plato systematizes the metaphysical idealism, and Aristotle grounds philosophy and logic, natural philosophy and ethics, emphasizing teleology, causation, and the purpose of things, and immanent form, the uniting of metaphysics, ethics, and politics into a coherent worldview. And that is essentially what this period is doing. So you can already see how they're stacking onto each other and they're clarifying what already came before.
Yeah. And notice too, in here, it's holistic. You use the term coherent. Some of these terms are also called the, transcendentals, truth, beauty, goodness, right? Metaphysics, ethics, logic. They saw the world as a whole, a coherent whole, and that's going to be something that marks that period of time.
Right. And then the last thing I had for the ancient period here is essentially Hellenistic and Roman philosophy, Stoicism, Epicureanism, skepticism, Neoplatonism. And this is the collapse of the polis after Alexander the Great. Focus turns from civic virtue to personal salvation and inner peace. Plotinus mythologizes reason, portraying it as the one. And this essentially is a transition from rational cosmology to spiritual ascent. Philosophy becomes a way of life again and sets the stage for the Christian synthesis, right? So what I'm about to make the claim is we actually stop doing what we would consider philosophy for 1,000 years because faith and reason become united in Christ. The only point of these categories is now to explicate and clarify theology, because there is now a transcendence. So what now, again, metaphysics, what's the unthinking chain? Okay, it's God. Now from the Christian worldview, we have God. We have the Logos, the second person of the Holy Trinity. Myself, made in the image of God. Now true ethics, true wisdom, becoming more like Christ unites you with him. There's a transcendent participation. Participation is going to be the big thing that's lost once we move into modernity. There is no thing you're participating with anymore. There is no transcendent purpose towards anything. And so I don't want to belabor this Orthodox stuff because I just highlighted the Christian synthesis philosophy now within Revelation. Faith and reason are harmonized. I believe in order to understand, but I don't want to go through all this stuff because that's really not the point per se, unless you want to bring it up. But do you have any thoughts so far? Is there anything else you want to add or clarify?
Well, it's interesting the kind of the emergence of Neoplatonic thought. So, I mean, something you get in Plato, and I think why it comes back in is that virtue epistemology and virtue ethics, that to think correctly must be informed by the moral, and the moral is informed by there's a symbiosis, the morals formed by, and so you see a resurgence of this in Neoplatonic thought too, that the two spheres are not actually separated.
Right.
So it's attempting to correct certain errors that kind of came in. And what I would say is that, and you'll certainly find this in St. Augustine's City of God, what men intended for evil, God intends for good. So whatever errors that happen in philosophy, God's omnipotent, omnibenevolent, he still works the good. And so the whole City of God is basically a description of all of this through the poets and all the philosophers. All the errors, all the goods are still within the realm of divine providence, working to prepare the soil for Christianity to take seed in, and so we'll see that too. And I just want to encourage everybody listening that God is the Lord, and he has providence over this. And so even the errors, and it'll eventually get into postmodernity, that it provides an opportunity for evangelism and the growth of orthodoxy, even in the failures, right? And the kind of synthesis of all these things. So as we're going through the history, just keep in your control of this all.
Right. And so just to briefly kind of summarize this, I talked a little bit about, so Christian synthesis is bringing philosophy now into light of revelation. I mean, I argue that's what the Gospel of John is doing. In Arche in Ho Logos is taking all that Greek stuff and using that jargon to describe everything that the prophets were speaking about. And in that sense, if you were living in that time and you were, educated in the Hellenistic schools, when you read the Gospel of John, you would understand what's the layers of meaning that are actually embedded within that concept, that the Logos was in the beginning, it was God, and how this actually then transitions philosophical thought. And I argue that the Cappadocian, the Nicene Fathers in the 4th century transformed the Greek metaphysics of ousia, being and person, redefined it through the Trinity. And what that did is God is not an abstract one, but being as communion. And essentially it solved their move solves the ancient problem of the one and the many. So we just talked about Plato and Aristotle. Well, Plato is interested in the ideal forms. He's saying that the concept of the chair is more real than the chair you and I are sitting on. Aristotle's saying, no, my system begins with the chair you're sitting on. And we can get to some type of understanding of form or causation, but it's the different approach to knowledge. It's the different approach to philosophy itself. Plato begins with the a prioris and deduces, and Aristotle begins with induction itself. And so my point here, that is a brief little way to frame up the one and the many. Is the one ideal true, or are the many chairs that all of us are sitting on the true? Which one's more real? And what our Cappadocian fathers are doing, and what the Orthodox Church, that's why when we say we're a both and worldview, that's not a cop-out. To me, that's a celebration. That means that we've actually fixed the problems, the inherent conflict, the dialectical conflict. And so the ultimate principle of reality is not abstract unity a la Neoplatonism, but love shared between distinct persons, to what you were talking about with the particularization and the concretization that modern philosophy actually doesn't participate in. It's all abstract. And Orthodoxy is saying, okay, we have abstract stuff, but that's only real if we then concretize it into space and time as peoples enacting compassion, mercy, and love towards another person made in the image of God, the same way that the triune God, the Trinity itself, relates to each other. And so, oops, wrong button. That leads to St. Maximus and the synthesis of Christian theology and Neoplatonism / Aristotelianism, and developed the idea of the logi in the logos, that every creature has its own meaning and destiny in Christ. History and cosmology become teleological. For Maximus, the true philosopher is not the one who contemplates abstract being. Oh, I didn't finish my thought there. It was... let me find where I wrote that down. Contemplates abstract being, but the one who becomes like God through love and virtue. One who becomes like God through love and virtue. So we see, again, this participatory dimension of our theology. And then St. John of Damascus systematizes theology in Aristotelian form, but retains the apophatic core. Philosophy is valuable, but bounded by the mystery, the apophatic mystery of God himself. And then I have Hesychism. St. Gregory Palamas, 14th century, confronts Barlaam of Calabria. Everybody's probably familiar with that. Western scholastic from Italy. Palamas defends the distinction between God's essence and energies. Philosophically, he preserves both divine transcendence and immanence without collapsing one into the other. And this then is essentially our worldview as Orthodox Christians. This is kind of the end point of where our paradigm has been explicated. And what leads next is the development of Western scholasticism. So, Father, do you have anything you'd like to say about all that?
So, I mean, if you read the history of Western philosophy, it is this dialectical tension, starting with Thales' empiricism, then moving to Anaximenes and Anaximander, more kind of rationalistic, and then back to Democritus and Puritanism. You have the kind of immanentization in Aristotle and the kind of abstract transcendent idealism of Plato, right? It just keeps going back between these dialectics. And the whole history of Western philosophy is marked by these dialectics. They get certain things right, and the other side points that out, and then it overreacts. And it can never synthesize that. Only Orthodoxy will synthesize that. And I'm just going to read from, if you don't mind, it's so great, from St. Justin Popovich's Theory of Knowledge from St. Isaac the Syrian. Philosophy, man always appears to greater or less extent a fragmented being. Nowhere is he seen as a whole. Nowhere is he seen complete and integrated, but always broken and fragmented. There is no philosophical system in which man is not broken up into parts. that would defeat the attempt of any thinker to put them together into a single whole. On the other hand, and so you're going to notice this dialectic. So he's already noticing this dialectical tension. Realism brings man down to the level of senses, and then through the senses to things, to matter, so that man is no longer his own master, but scattered among things. On the other hand, here's the dialectic. Rationalism separates man and his understanding. Seeing the latter as the chief fountain of truth and the highest measure of all things, it is attributing all worth to it, making it absolute and idolizing it, while at the same time belittling the other psychic and physical powers of man. Critical thought, for its part, is little more than an apologia for rationalism and essentialism that drags the understanding of man with it down to the level of senses. What do you get next? Pantheism. As for pantheism and all such monistic systems, so you get dualistic, monism, dualism, monism. For monistic systems, they regard the world and man as a mass contradictory opposites that can never be brought into a single logical unity. All these philosophical systems have the same result: superficial, phenomenalist understanding of both man and the world. The man, and we'll get into this is kind of preparing the way for what we're going to talk about later, of the phenomenalist philosophy, a philosophy that's always relativist as well, is a man without a central focal point. Where does man stand? Where does the world stand? What is the foundation of the intellect and knowledge? Man tries to explain himself in terms of things, but with a total lack of success. For by explaining himself in terms of things, man, in the end, is reduced to a thing himself, to matter. However much he may struggle to do so, the man of the phenomenalist philosophy is in no position to testify to the objective reality of things. Still less is he able to show that things possess truth. By attempting to explain man by man, philosophy achieves a bizarre result. It presents a mirror image of a mirror image. Perfect description of postmodernity, right?
Right, absolutely.
That's in the last analysis, such philosophy, whatever its path, is centered on matter and on man. And one thing follows from all this: the impossibility of any truth knowledge of man and of the world. And I could go on, but like maybe I'll bring up that later. But I want to point out that even St. Isaac the Syrian and St. Justin Popovich realize this dialectical tension. Man's fragmented. He's in opposites. He has no ground of truth. Philosophy is dead. Outside of the synthesis of orthodoxy that's led into, you see the fathers there, there's no explanation. There's only death.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. And really, about everything we're about to show now, moving forward, is the foundations of the world that we have now, and where the West went wrong. I mean, to this point, essentially, now there's going to be some overlap here in the scholastic synthesis, but we were doing theology. Like, as St. John Damascus makes clear, philosophy is just a linguistic tool to talk about essentially theology. And theology is the point of this all. It isn't until the scholastic period here, the 12th and 14th centuries, and look at our timeline. Remember, Maximus, 7th century, Damascus, 8th century, Palamas, 14th century, and now by the 12th and 14th centuries in the West, because of the introduction of Aristotle, now they're moving in a new trajectory. The transition from Augustinian Platonic interiority to Aristotelian realism in the West is kind of how I framed it. And so Aquinas integrates Aristotle with Christianity. Reason now perfects faith. You don't begin with faith, you begin with reason to get to your faith. You see, that's already flipped from the previous period. We always began with faith, and reason after you have faith can help clarify and come to understanding. But now reason is already sort of re-elevated, and nature contemplates grace. Of course, you get nominalism and that type of stuff during that Western medieval period. But once from there, now we move into essentially modern philosophy, 15th through 18th centuries. Bacon, Galileo, Descartes, you get the scientific revolution, where confidence in the method and mathematical description of nature, epistemology, replaces metaphysics. knowledge through method and observation, not participation in being. So again, that's what I was talking about. And this is what Yanaros highlights explicitly in his postmodern metaphysics and the schism in philosophy, is saying that it's this point where the West no longer focused on participation as the point of knowledge, as the point of theology, as the point of ethics and morality. This was always from understanding that you were participating in something. From this point forward, it's no longer about participation. It's about the methods we use to come to know the world.
Can I point out, in terms of Protestantism, so the reformers were nominalist. Okay. So
right.
Prior to this movement was nominalism. Okay.
Denies universals for those
now
who don't.
What you get, so penal substitutionary atonement, all the soteriology of Protestants, all premised on nominalism, in case you don't know. Then the next movement, just historically and philosophically, is this kind of Cartesian, Baconian, Galilean obsession with algorithmization methodology. Well, think about this. What is it that Protestants, I've always argued this, Protestants are thoroughly a modern movement.
Yes.
They have nothing to do with the church.
They have no connection to premodernity.
It's all about abstract propositional text and hermeneutics, right?
Yes.
Well, I've got this method that we interpret Scripture, sharp inscription. What's your hermeneutics? Well, anybody that's studied the history of philosophy will know, but like, that's it's totally modern, because look right there, methodology. Well, I just applied this kind of Cartesian method to reading text and propositions. It's not about participatory, in the energies of God and virtues and stuff like this. It's an abstract, rationalistic, methodological approach. And I'm like, you're a Cartesian, you're a modern.
Right.
You're as far away from the church as you could get.
Right. Father, I don't know if I told you, but during my PhD defense, one of the professors, she's actually she writes and publishes papers in basically philosophy of mind, person and neuroscience. And she's a Thomistic scholar, and she's a sort of expert on Aristotle. And after reading my book, she said, well, I see that you keep making the claim that Orthodoxy is pre-modern. Don't you think Catholicism could be included in there? And I brought up, well, I think aspects could be certainly seen as pre-modern regarding the trad-Latin dimension of the church, but with Vatican I, Vatican II, and really much of the movements of the contemporary Catholic Church, I don't think you could easily clarify it as pre-modern. And she conceded. And if that's the case,
wow,
then Orthodoxy is the only pre-modern option.
Yeah. Good point. Great point.
So anyways, the scientific revolution, now we're privileging method, right? And this develops two different schools, which will define the analytic and the continental tradition in philosophy. You may have heard that. Continental, usually understood as the European schools, analytic, usually the Anglo schools. So that'd be, America, England, Canada, Australia, those areas, they typically are analytic. Well, this all comes from, those distinctions come from the pre-Kantian traditions of the rationalist and the empiricist. And so on the rationalists, you have Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, empiricists, Locke, Berkeley, Hume. And the clash is between innate ideas, reason alone yields truth, a la Descartes sitting there in a room with his eyes closed, coming to full knowledge, and sense data, experience alone yields truth, meaning actually measuring, taking the statistical average and observing nature itself, the empiricist school. And so Hume's skepticism about causality and self-identity destabilizes the Enlightenment confidence in both of these schools, the rationalist school and the empiricist school, because what they were doing was both building off the presuppositions of the previous tradition that are essentially rooted in Christianity. And so taking skepticism further and further and further, they realize, oh crap, maybe we can't empirically actually define causality and how we come to know how, our observations of the world. It could be not. This gets into, Hume's famous thought thought experiment regarding if the sun's going to come up tomorrow or not. Obviously, it's most likely it's going to, but you can't empirically prove it until it happens. And this leads to Kant. He's woken out of his philosophical slumber by Hume, and Kant then addresses Hume and addresses the problems with the rationalists and the empiricist school with their, again, critique of pure reason. That's what Kant's Copernican revolution really is in the 18th century. And so knowledge arises from both experience and the a priori structures of mind. So what Kant is doing is saying, okay, yeah, maybe there's sense data out there, absolutely, but can you really know the world that you're observing in and of itself? The answer he comes to is no. And he says what we're then having is he adds 2 more categories to Aristotle's 10 metaphysical categories, creates the 12 a priori categories of the mind. And essentially you have a synthetic happening between sense data and these categories of mind. And that is the world you're experiencing. And so therefore the mind, if that is true, the mind is actively shaping reality. It's actively shaping the thing you're experiencing. And therefore, whatever you're experiencing, you're not experiencing it in and of itself. And so philosophy becomes about the conditions of knowledge not being itself, the turn to subjectivity, something that Father Deacon already mentioned about phenomenology, which is where this is going to go, is that with Kant's critique saying, you can't prove to me that you fully know the external world. And then he uses the a priori categories. The question then is, what can we know? And you have two essentially choices in this fork in the road. You have what becomes the German idealists who say, well, I guess we just have to study personal subjective experience. We just have to study the self, because we need to focus more on the a priori categories than we need to worry about the sense data that's coming in. And the opposite end of that is the 19th century British empiricists who say, okay, Kant, maybe you're right, but if we're going to make any truth claim, the best claim we can make is using the scientific method and observing nature. And so these are essentially then the 2 schools that split after Kant. In German idealism, their methodology is phenomenology. The empiricist school, their methodology is empiricism. And this defines empiricism, the analytic school, and phenomenology, the continental school. You have more you want to add to that? That was kind of a lot, but I think that point, Kant's, we talked about this in our stream on metaphysics. Kant is an incredibly important and influential figure. Not that you have to agree with everything he says, but if you're looking at intellectual history, it really is the Copernican revolution in philosophy.
I mean, David Hume wakes him up from his dogmatic slumber.
Right.
If the previous things are true, then this follows. So a death of metaphysics, which is why Kant, most people don't read this. It's actually a pretty easy read. Prolegomena to any future metaphysics by Immanuel Kant.
Yep, I have it.
That's the death of, that's it. And as you'd pointed out, philosophy then goes into 2 directions after that. An analysis, well, we can't make any metaphysical comments. Basically, everybody's metaphysical quietists at that point. So either you move into language and logic. So I'm just locked in my mind. And as you'd pointed out, as Kant had said, the conditions for the possibility of those, i.e. the logical conditions. Or you move into the phenomenological realm of like appearances, because I can deal with appearances, but I can't deal with metaphysics. And that's actually a really significant move in the history of the world, that like I'm locked outside of the world. Like I'm no longer so. Where does academic philosophy go? Well, those are the 2 directions historically that it goes.
Right. And here I just have a few of the kind of influential reactions. So in regards to German idealism, as I said, that includes Hegel, right? Hegel and his all-encompassing system of the dialectic. This has to do with, as Father was talking about, from that reading that you had, that phenomenology is, let me show you. Actually, I have a notebook that is all about philosophy, where I just write down all my different notes for all these different schools. And so I want to show you guys that this right here is essentially the method of phenomenology right here. It's saying this is the observer. So you see this little triangle here, the observer, the finite self, self-consciousness, then viewing these appearances out here. And this is all then part of this totalizing system of self-consciousness. And that is what the dialectic is about. It's that you are here, your self-awareness is here, and self-consciousness is actually perceiving the other part of self. It's all self. And so the key to reality is one's own self. The categories of understanding consciousness are the categories of reality. See, they're saying, okay, Kant, we'll agree with all this a priori stuff. Let's just focus on those categories, because those are the categories of reality, because that's the only thing we can experience are those categories. And this approach towards phenomenology, this is a sort of monistic idealism. That's what German idealism is. It's a monistic idealism. And from Fichte and Schelling and Hegel, philosophy becomes historical and self-conscious, truth revealed through dialectical development. You get somebody like a Schopenhauer, where he says, okay, well, it's actually the will, not reason, as ultimate reality. This is who Nietzsche gets his inspiration from, is Arthur Schopenhauer. Kierkegaard saying, no, faith over system, individual before God. And Marx inverts Hegel and creates a material dialectic, conditions that shape consciousness. And Nietzsche declares God is dead and challenges all metaphysical foundations. What happens is the collapse of metaphysical absolutes turn to life, will, existence, and the critique of reason. And this essentially puts you now dead into the 19th century. And this is where all of our modern institutions in the academy begin to emerge from. All their different methods, the schools of sociology, of religious studies, of all the humanities, all the sciences, they begin to emerge during this period in the way that we perceive them in the 21st century today. They are a remnant of this essentially 150-year transitionary period.
And all this goes back to Descartes, who what? God's even dependent on self. Me thinking, the cogito. So, I mean, that's why Descartes called the father of modernity. Like this self-obsession, self-first. The whole system's built from self.
Yep.
Is Cartesian. And all of this is just a logical outplay of Cartesianism.
Right. So this brings us then to the 20th century philosophy. And so, like I said, I have this little notebook. You'll see, I keep all this stuff. Like I can literally flip over here to, Hegel's philosophy. If you're a nerd like me and FDA, maybe you'd find this beneficial. For the average person, you don't have to spend hours putting like study guide books together, but that's kind of what I did. But I wanted to get to, I had it on my logical positivist section here, but let me pull up the document. And so we can see here that 20th century philosophy, the analytic tradition, this is building upon the 19th century empiricists. And, Russell, Wittgenstein, Quine, Kripke, clarity and precision, language as the key to meaning. This is actually something that Fowler brought up. I believe it was backstage before we even went live, or maybe you mentioned it while we were live, but talking about the problem of modern philosophy, it's just all linguistic. It's all based back in language games. And this is part of this tradition right here, that philosophy becomes a linguistic analysis. It's a transition from metaphysics to logic and language. And this is where essentially logical positivism becomes undermined because of the criticisms of verifiability. And this is why I would argue the tag argument is so powerful. So for somebody who actually knows what's going on, I just did a video on 30 arguments for Christians. 10 of them were for the existence of God. And I was talking about tag is how I believe it's the best argument, but it may not be the most beneficial for the average person, because it does take some type of philosophical foundational understanding to actually address. And most people, it just goes right over their head. But if they know what they're talking about, then they understand the history of ideas, logical positivism, which was one of these last attempts to say we can absolutely know what's true. The way we do it is make sure that all statements are logical and empirical. But the problem is, did you begin with that premise through empiricism and logic?
Yeah.
And this is essentially just totally wrecks logical positivism because they didn't. So based on their own premise of their system, they didn't begin, they adopted some presuppositions that aren't proved through empirical methods and said, now with these presuppositions, now we have a totalizing system. And it isn't until Quine literally brings up that, hey, actually, we're not using empiricism to actually begin with our first premises. It kind of undermines the whole process. And so on the other end in Europe, you have the continental tradition, phenomenology, Husserl, the return to things in themselves, experience as foundation, existentialism, Heidegger and Sartre. And you could put Heidegger in the phenomenology as well. But human existence, being toward death, authenticity. And this is where you get postmodernism then. You have the critique of truth, power, and meta-narratives. The transition is from subjects to structures of meaning and power, skepticism towards all universals. And this is really, this is the pool of philosophy that then whatever emerges out in the 21st century, what it's emerging from. All these things took place essentially by the 1960s. This wraps up really the last vestiges of true philosophical transition in schools. You know, once you get into the 1960s, much of this has already happened. And now it's just like dealing with the ramifications of all this stuff.
Yeah, very good. Exactly.
So then we get to contemporary philosophy, late 20th century, 21st century. So what's been going on since everything that we just laid out? What is the state when FDA and I mention contemporary philosophy, modern philosophy? What do we mean? Do we mean modern philosophy from Descartes forward? I mean, in a way, yes. But most specifically, late 20th century to the 21st century, what is it? Well, it's defined by fragmentation and pluralism. The analytic continental divide has softened, but philosophy loses any sort of unified project. There is no which is okay. I'm not here to say that we need to be in two camps of the analytic and the continental. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying this is where it's at. They've realized that those themselves as I'm only an analytic philosopher. It's kind of fallen to the wayside. Explosion of sub philosophy of mind, science, AI, language, applied ethics, rise of interdisciplinary cognitive science, neuroscience, information theory. And the transition is from metaphysics to methods, philosophy as meta discourse rather than a worldview. And this has led to what people have referred to, and that's not just me and FDA, this is actually like secular people have said, this is sort of the end of philosophy or the death of philosophy. And I have two sections here to sort of lay out what exactly that means. Thinkers like Richard Rorty and Lyotard suggest that philosophy's foundational role is over. Academic philosophy often becomes technical, bureaucratic, and detached from any spiritual or existential concerns. That it's from wisdom, philosophia, which Father Deacon was mentioning, to a profession, a shift many critics, especially in the Orthodox world, see as a spiritual decline. At least that's the way I framed it. And so what is the death of philosophy? Well, it means cultural death. Philosophy no longer serves as civilization's teacher. Science, economics, and technology replaced it as sources of authority. Epistemic death. The Enlightenment's project of grounding knowledge failed. After Kant, every attempt to find an indubitable foundation, reason, language, history, collapses under critique. Nietzsche, Heidegger, and later Derrida show that the grounds of philosophy are self-undermining themselves, which all leads to a spiritual death. In Christian, especially Orthodox terms, philosophy died when it severed reason from logos, from the divine source of truth. Without participation in being, philosophy becomes a system of abstractions, as FDA has already said multiple times. And this is why modern philosophy produces information without wisdom. And so why many people speak of it being a dead end, it's the loss of ultimate ground. After Nietzsche's God is dead, philosophy can no longer appeal to transcendent truth. Infinite reflexivity. Philosophy critiques its own conditions endlessly. It becomes a meta-philosophy producing commentary on commentary. And then institutional capture. Philosophy departments produce specialists in subfields, not sages. And technocratic domination. Science, AI, and economics define the real. Philosophy reacts rather than leads. And the moral collapse. Without teleology or metaphysical good, ethics becomes procedural, utilitarian calculus, rights discourse.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, those are great points.
Anything you take umbrage on in my framing of it, or?
I mean, no, that summed it up perfectly. I mean, it's just amazing. I think some of these people that I often argue with and debate, trying to establish different theories of knowledge, it's all you have to do is look at the history of philosophy, like epistemic death. Like, it's over. There's no way to get it. Worse yet is cultural death. And I think I really like the point about institutional capture. So, I mean, you have to understand that, you know, the kind of human nature of philosophers, it's like they learned all this stuff, this philosophy. If there's a death, they're going to be out of a job.
Right.
What do you do? I mean, when I go through with my students, like in the epistemology class, I'm like, they'll hand wave it. So notice, like, the philosophers are bringing up legitimate problems that cannot be answered ever from an autonomous position. And so they just kind of hand wave it. And the reason why is that, like, well, they realize it would be the death of humanity, the death of their jobs and stuff like that. Well, just pretend that it never came up. We still got to go on. So if it goes on and it's not grounded in these kind of transcendent things that we're talking about, then, well, truth is replaced by power. And I think that's why it leads in this section 4 here, the loss of an ultimate ground leads to, well, can we just talk about the mirror image of the mirror image?
Right.
And that's interesting enough. Isn't that Rorty's book, Mirror of Nature or something? What's Rorty's?
I think it is something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, so Rorty got it. It's just a commentary on a commentary on a commentary of a mirror image of a mirror image. Because let's just keep going on. What else do we do? You either live or die, and, like, our life's meaningless, but we'll just keep making a commentary on how meaningless it is. And then power replaces truth, institutional capture. And then, especially when people are like, well, the death of truth, then what else? Like, production, power. And so if AI and economics could just produce something that keeps me distracted, then that's the way forward. So that's why you get the technocratic domination, is that there's nothing to control anymore. There's no transcendent grain to constrain anymore. Well, it's like, well, that's it. Institutional capture, technocratic domination. And is exactly as you said, you put on your 5th point in section 4, moral collapse. And the phrase that Dr. Tristan Mankelhart says is the deflation of morality.
Yeah, I like that. The deflation of morality.
Like, there's no more anything. Right. And so ultimately it does become a world of death, because it's simply now power struggles.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're seeing going on in the modern world. We're beyond dialogue. We're beyond the open university and all these things. They keep using these phrases to distract you, to be like, no, everything's okay. They're killing each other. You can't talk to the other side anymore. No. Why? Because all the things, how did we get here? We just went over exactly how we got here. Everything is manufactured. It's manufactured consent, is Noam Chomsky, is manufactured descent. Mm-hmm. There's no notion of the human. So interesting enough, we've kind of returned back to the age of mythos, of where there is no individual. It is the NPC. Everything is controlled and manufactured, but almost in a worse state.
Right, because it has a technocratic authority to it. right? It's not just, the mythos of the cultural net and the cultural canopy that we once lived in. Now it's reinforced globally. It has no singular geographic space that it occupies. No, this is a global culture. This is a global phenomenon. And when you mention the commentary on commentary, I mean, that's one of my frustrations with academia in general is they really don't push you to go just read the greats. You take a course in something and you read people's commentary on Plato. You read people's commentary on somebody's commentary on Plato. You read, it can be any field. It can be sociology, religious studies, philosophy. It doesn't matter. That's kind of the state of academia. It's just a constant. And that's why I think it's so convoluted now with all the voices, is that everybody's just speaking about commentaries. There really are, there are very few great scholars that are producing just incredibly unique original work now. Everybody's kind of in this power struggle. And I think that the first one about, and number 3, the cultural death, is that I truly do believe that philosophy does not play a leading role in the cultural narrative that it once did. And it really is a sort of reactionary process. And I would argue that is because these 2 limiting methodologies that they took after Kant, and really, before that, the whole project, but really these limiting itself to these 2 methodologies and becoming to a dead end. Well, technology is still producing goods. The economy is still making money. And so they're actually, whether it's good or bad, I'm not making a value claim. I'm just saying that they're actually an engine that's still moving forward, and philosophy has kind of like come to a screeching halt. And so now to save itself, it's like, well, why don't we do an ethical critique of AI or an ethical discussion on, they're just reacting to the things that these other fields are actually producing. Now, again, good or bad, but that has lost its sort of cultural prestige. It's lost its cultural influence. I mean, you think in the 1960s, and Marshall McLuhan, major philosophers would be on national television talking about things like the cultural discourse, I think, was so much better. Now you turn on the TV, it's all reality television. It's dumbed down stuff. But, what was it? Firing Line with William F. Buckley. I'm no William F. Buckley fan, but at least conversations they're having at that time are so much higher. And you saw average people in the audience participating in it. Where now I think people are so dumbed down, they can't even participate in something like that. And so the cultural death is a reflection of the culture we're actually consuming itself. It's dead. There's no vitality to it.
And even in terms of politics, I mean, you see the left, which has always been violent, but they're an expression of postmodernity, right? Like beyond truth. So it's power. It's Machiavellian, all these different things. And eventually they push too far and they get the right's somewhat temperate, but there's always a reaction to that. Right. And we have no way philosophically or politically of solving that because precisely of this. It's like, it is eventually it's a violent society. The only political solutions to that is a reaction violently to the other reaction of the violent, which is kind of reminiscent of this infant reflexivity, as you point out, like a commentary on the commentary of violence being violent commentary on the violent of.
Right. To where you get to the point or just stating that men and women are different now becomes violence. Like how does the academy get to that point? To what you just said, this hamster wheel of commentary on commentary of commentary, to where you've redefined terms to such a degree, stating basic biological facts becomes an act of violence. And even an act of violence that could be justified for physical violence, right? We've seen this lately with people going on campus, and I'm not just the Charlie Kirk assassination, but literally people just going on campus saying
power and violence. Yeah.
Literally just saying that men and women aren't the same, and you see some trans person try to hit somebody. And there was one video I saw, and the person justified it by saying, well, you're being violent to me. He said, well, but what did I do? Because I said men and women aren't the same thing. He said, yeah, therefore physical violence is justified because you are just as violent to me. And it's like, whoa. And you can imagine they go to their philosophy professor and they try to justify it for them. And it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, and if you say, well, I find your violent reaction, like me calling, you calling that violent, I call that violence, they won't accept that, right?
Right.
But the thing is, it's like, well, we're beyond truth and logical consistency, so it doesn't matter if they're being logically hypocritical, because it's all, but my side's right. I think a lot of that I think there's an amalgamation of both these kind of postmodern kind of ideas of being beyond all the things that we just talked about. There's the existentialist, right? Well, what is the real then? The real is what I experience, the subjectivity of my phenomenal experience. So there is no logic anymore that kind of grounds that. No. Then you add in there the kind of Marxist and post-Marxist critical theorists kind of, well, everything has to be interpreted through oppressed and oppressed,
right.
Oppressed dialectics. Then you're always right.
Right.
Like everything's justified in logic's white supremacy, and that's part of like the stuff that we overthrew and stuff like that. So that's why there is no dialogue anymore. It's literally the only reaction politically and philosophically is violence to, if you can't dialogue with somebody, and that's what's so unfortunate in our time, is that we can't reason with somebody that's like that. The force and violence is the only reaction to that kind of system of thought. And so it's just this kind of infinite spiral into death, which is unfortunate. No, and that's why I always say, I'm like, there is no political, philosophical solution to that, because of it's violence to end the violence of the other violence, and then the next violence will come up.
Right.
Like the only solution is orthodoxy.
And to your point about like the radical leftists being the outgrowth of this entire thing, is just look at the 3 points that I made in point 3. So if culture is dead, there's no unifying canopy amongst the community that an individual lives in. If truth is dead, now there's nothing to actually rationally justify or come to argumentation for to defend. And if the spiritual is dying, like it makes sense why people are literally becoming possessed by demonic ideas and demonic concepts that fill them with passion, and they confuse the passion they're filled with some type of validity. That it makes sense why they become violent. It makes sense why they're killing people. It makes sense why they desacralize their body and scarify themselves with all the things that it's literally they are conditioned to believe that the true, the good, and the beautiful are somehow oppressive to them.
Yeah.
And it's not something to aspire towards. And you can't, I mean, without that basic presupposition that the good and the true and the beautiful are things to aspire towards, how can you have any agreement with that person? There's no bridge that can be, that, you can't meet in the middle with them anywhere.
Yeah. And that's what I said. I have no idea what the political solution is to, I mean, that's why things like authoritarianism, fascism occur, which were the historical and logical consequences of kind of Talmudic Bolshevism and international socialism that embrace these kind of ideas. It's like you're going to produce the opposite.
Right.
And like we're now in a world where it's like there is nothing politically that you can do other than a kind of autocracy and fascist kind of authoritarian to like the biggest threat. It like has to be eliminated.
Right. I want to know what your thoughts.
The only way that we can get out of this. Yeah.
Well, no, I'll go ahead and finish your thought. I don't mean to cut you off.
Well, the only way we can get out of this, and who knows, like temporarily those might be actual only solutions that you can do. There almost might be necessary evils. I've actually argued that. I'm like, I don't know. Like, obviously one side's so dangerous that like maybe a necessary evil might be kind of necessary to stop that, but like that's not a solution. That's not where should we looking. I mean, ultimately, you're going to have to integrate people into Orthodoxy and get a new mindset to rebuild and get away from everything that we went through. And that's going to be, I mean, it's happening. But it's going to be hard as well. But like that's the only way ultimately is a solution. But like it might be unfortunate temporarily. There might be some really unfortunate situations politically that one might have to advocate for to stop a lot of this stuff.
Right. No, I totally agree.
That might make it worse too. Like that's the other thing that's probably that might create another. So it's really hard. Like I don't really kind of have answers on that. I can identify how it happens, philosophically and historically, but other than a prescription for orthodoxy, I actually don't know. I don't know what the solution is to it.
Well, and what I was going to say is, the only option I see is orthodoxy, because I do see this as a premodern, dealing with presuppositions. And like I said, with the trad cath, the orthodox, the pagan phenomenon on the right wing, I think that's totally subconscious. I do not think the average person on the right wing is thinking, you know what, I need to escape modernity. No, the anxiety, the existential angst you feel is that modernity is collapsing and you're not sure what exactly it is to put your finger on. And to your point, do we go and attack the people that we're just describing? I would say not right now, at least. I think our efforts need to be in building orthodoxy so that we actually have a communal resistance against something that we already do. I mean, we're doing it right now. Orthodoxy is growing. But my point is we need to bring more and more people in the church. We need to build American Orthodoxy, double, triple in size, and that we then as a cultural force actually have something tangible to defend. And we have real communities thriving all across the United States, not in just pockets, but we can already feel the momentum. I mean, look at what's happening online. There's real momentum behind orthodoxy. And as we grow, say God willing, in the near future, we become 10% of the US population. Now we have real cultural cachet. We actually have real cultural influence, and we can then begin to wield that in nonviolent means. But if things were to turn violent, we actually have communities to defend and protect. Where right now it's so desperate. Say there was some violent offensive against radical leftists or anybody you perceive to be the enemy. What do you come back to? Okay, you've killed. What are you coming back to? Now you've already done the act. Well, now we're just left in the same problem. We need people to adopt the frontum of the church. We need people to change their sentimentality towards the American project, towards democracy, towards capitalism, and not in the sense that you become the exact opposite. No, it takes nuance. The church is both and. You can be in favor of aspects of capitalism without being identifying as like, yeah, I'm a staunch capitalist. No, there's nuance here. You can say we need social programs for people without saying, yeah, I'm a socialist. No. There's wiggle room. The Orthodox frontum enlightens that and highlights where exactly we can move. And so I find optimism in the rise of Orthodoxy and the amount of converts we're having. And I think right now, I mean, let the culture, the Protestant culture wars that want to be provocative and provoke, let them do that. Why don't we build? Why don't we build that in 5 years we are triple, quadruple the size that we are now? What then? Now we actually have just like the Catholics, they have a little bit more political cachet than we do because of the numbers they have. We need the same thing. And now we can actually operate as a community in America, in the Western world. But that doesn't mean any of these things are going to go away immediately. I just don't see how they can. And I also, at the same time, to your point with the violence, I don't see how they can be reconciled. Like I always use Peter Berger, the Protestant sociologist of the mid-20th century, his theories of the sacred canopy, that every civilization, at least from his sociological method or theory, has some type of shared sacred canopy of cultural heroes, values, stories, music, things that unite the people that live in totally different areas. But if they were to meet, they have a shared canopy, a shared language, a shared semiotic. That does not exist in America. Basically, the only thing left is like this remnant of Americana culture, like cowboy country music, the cowboy persona, the Western, rugged man out in the Wild West. That's kind of, which is still sort of uniquely a European white man archetype. That's really the only thing left that is part of this sort of sacred canon. Everything's been morphed. We are becoming more diluted culturally, but also more compartmentalized as groups and cultures. And I don't think there is a unifying American culture other than the globo homo culture that really doesn't matter what country you're in. You can go to Germany, it's still there. That is not that is not what it means to be American. I would argue it's not even fully American culture, although we are the exporters of it. In a way, it is American culture, but it's not an organic thing. This is, whether it be the conspiracies of Hollywood and academia and economics, the political elites, this has all been orchestrated over time. People don't organically choose to live in a society with mass immigration and the unable to delineate between man and woman. Nobody chooses that. But how do you get out of it with the people that have already adopted that to be real? I don't see how you can without time. It's almost like we have to outbreed them. Like if we became 10% of the population and every Orthodox woman had 3 to 5 children, in 2 to 3 generations, things look very different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the elites' plan is the only reason why they do, the elites are not ideologues. They're not actually committed to liberal politics or conservative. They're concerned with, I mean, they are ideologues in a sense. I think they have kind of a technocratic, kind of Gnostic vision of the future, but ultimately it's grounded in power. And so they ultimately are doing all this stuff to collapse society, to usher in a 4th industrial revolution.
Exactly.
Like I don't know how they're going to do it. I think they're probably trying to do it in multiple ways.
And I think that's why, I don't know if you heard Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, recently talked about how worrisome Christian nationalism is for him. Now, he's the Jewish CEO of Palantir. Why would Christian nationalism be such a threat? Because of the point you're making. This is all part of a deliberate collapse of the West so that it can install the 4th Industrial Revolution. It can install the technocratic world order. But what they're worried about is, what if they collapse modernity and those nasty little Christian nationalists take it over? Now, again, he's worried about Protestants and Catholics, the general. But still, my point is, there is an angst amongst them because they know, okay, for us to fulfill the hopes of modernity, the technocratic centralized structure, transhuman, this is where we're going. I mean, Alex Karp he's part of Palantir. He's part of that whole Silicon Valley movement. So if that's where they think they're going, and they've partnered, you see Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Andreessen all partner with Trump, even Larry Ellison of Oracle. They see, okay, we've hitched our wagon here because this is where the cultural energy is. But dang, what if all these people didn't agree with us and actually supplanted like the infrastructure we're building? I think that's actually an anxiety that they worry about.
Let me read a super chat real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. We can get into super chats.
McColby says $5. One thing I've noticed is that at the logical conclusion of a lot of different motifs and thought that seek to put the individual at the highest point, its pride, it completely ruins any type of ability for true understanding and communion, which is exactly what you mentioned about 20 minutes ago, right?
Right.
But I do like the point you just ended with too, is that so we're not black-pilled.
Yeah, you can't be black-pilled. I've heard too many Orthodox despair over our context. Don't despair, guys.
The fact that the elites are worrying about collapse, that presents an opportunity for us.
Exactly.
That they're actually worrying that, like, oh my gosh, like what happens if orthodoxy comes in and fills the void?
Right.
Like, that's great hope.
Right.
And like
what if
I
monarchy
said,
instead of technocracy?
Yeah, like, I mean, look through the whole history of this. You still see God working through that. And so that should give you hopes too. It's like man fails. I mean, what's the theme of all this tonight? Man is autonomous, pretended autonomy fails, and God wins. Like he's still
right.
So, I mean, if you watch the whole history of philosophy in Western civilization, like you shouldn't be afraid, which is exactly that's all the enemy has to do. Because Christ conquered death. There's nothing left to fear. It's all done. So all the demons can do is get you in an emotional state to be like, yeah, but aren't you like, what if this? I call them the what if demons.
Right.
What if this happened? What if are literally not even real? Like they haven't happened. So they're getting you, they're real estate agents in imaginary places that you're investing all your time in, which is totally stupid, which is why the most repeated phrase in scripture is not that God loves you or repent. It's fear not.
Yeah.
That's it. Fear not. That's the only thing that the enemy has against us. And like we fall into it. But like if you just kind of abstract and look like what we're talking about, like there's nothing to fear.
Right.
Like God's hand and providence is in it all.
Right. No, I think that's the Orthodox approach, where if you are a boomer MAGA supporter, like that's all you can do is hold on to it and prevent the collapse. Like, now you're a physical conservative, but you justify Trump spending bills. Well, we got to make sure the project's still going. If you're Orthodox, it's like, okay, things may get really, really bad. It may be really difficult. Okay, but at least I have faith in God. And in a sense, for us to get out of the situation we're in right now, we have to make a drastic transition. Maybe the collapse of the West, at least economically, or whatever this project is, or this transitionary point, this is actually an opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to be strong enough to resist it, to live through it, to withstand it, to persevere through it, but also to build something that maybe will supplant the thing that they're trying to build. Maybe when some of these elders have talked about this golden age of orthodoxy, what if America was majority Orthodox? We don't, and that's where some of the people take my eschatology streams a little too far, where they think I'm predicting like the next thing that's going to happen, or I'm putting out some timeline. I'm going to say a date on when. That's not what we do. The saints are just giving us signposts as we move through time to keep watch. There's a golden age. Multiple saints have said this. How does that look? Maybe it's our own country, and therefore you should actually be working towards something. Like that's where I've seen too many Orthodox Christians despair to such a degree where they just give up on finding a wife, building a business, like doing something productive. And like, bro, I get it. I'm with you. Fiat currency, globalism, radical. Yeah, obviously doesn't mean you don't stop working. Like what? That's not the way out. You don't just throw your hands up and give up. I mean, if you want to be somebody who flees into the mountains and builds a cabin, feel free. I'm not going to say that's not something that some people should do, but in general, I don't think the correct response is to totally despair and sort of give up on life and give up on hopes of becoming something better or even growing something within the system. Maybe the system will collapse. That doesn't mean you shouldn't start a business tomorrow. In my opinion, go start your business. Maybe the economy totally collapses by 2026. Maybe it doesn't. And you already have 50 to 100 clients. Like, I think men need to have the mentality that no matter what's going to come, we're going to persevere through it. I'm going to build something. I'm going to die building something. I think that's the mentality. Now, it could be building your church. You could be a priest at a parish. That's a legitimate calling. It could be building your plumbing company. It could be building your body of knowledge or building your whatever it is. You have to be driven to build something. If not, you're going to be swept up by the sentimentality of today's world.
I mean, before the end of the world is going, most likely, statistically, is going to be your end. You're going to die.
Yeah. We
So
probably won't be here.
when you're a judgment day, and judgment is ontological, it's not a statutory, juridical. Who are you? Who you're going to be known as, and who you are, the face of the Lord, and all of the world and the cosmos is going to be known when things were the worst. We don't know who you. I mean, if you had an easy life and everything economically and socially, politically was great, like that, is that who you want to be known as? I encourage all of you, be the person that's like, it was the worst situation, hope against hope he had. He did everything against all odds. That displays virtue and character. And so you make it pretty easy. You have two options. You're a doomer and you'll be judged that way. That's who you will be for eternity. Like, we only have this time. What we are now is what we're going to be in eternity. Right. And the best way to be more than what we are and the greatest is in adversity. So I'm like, this is great times. Like, man up, pony up, son. Quit being a feminist, especially if you're a man.
Yeah.
And get to work and build something. Do something so that can last, that you're going to take into eternity and be like, I know it was bad, but at least I did this. I had my last stand. I built it against all odds. I built a family. I built, I invested, I worked out, I did all the things, even when it seemed all meaningless, because I had hope against hope. There it is. You carried it into eternity, and that's who you're going to be judged as, because that's who you are. Or you go the other way. You're going to be a doomer, and you're going to be judged as that. And God help you and have mercy on your soul. But you have a choice, and like, God, give us more time to make the right choices in that. Right. Because there'll be a day when, that's what St. Paul says, redeem the time. Like, there'll be a day where we don't have any more choices. We can't do any more.
Right. No, I love, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Well, very well said. And that's why if we grew Orthodoxy, say in 5 to 10 years, Orthodoxy quadrupled or tripled, building your business, maybe you build a plumbing business, but now once Orthodoxy grows, you're a plumber for Orthodox Christian. Maybe you live in a great community and those are your only clients. That's a fantastic opportunity. We need, as Orthodox Christians, to eventually buy and deal with each other, just as other communities in America do, right? Our community isn't based on racial lines. It isn't based on the geographies that we came from. It's based on our faith in Christ and our Orthodox Christian faith. That's what unites us. And that truly is multicultural. That truly does transcend boundaries between groups. And I think that's the hope in the future. And I mean, to your point, do you want to be, let's say you're right about every conspiracy theory and you are judged by Christ and you're on Judgment Day and he's like, you know what, Bob, you were right about absolutely everything. What did you do? What did you do? And you're like, well, I didn't do anything. Is that who you really want to be? Or say, hey, you were right about everything and you did everything you could. Maybe some were successful, some failed, but is it true failure? I mean, that's where it's like, as a man, you have to build this mentality that the work and the journey itself is the point. You just have to figure out what you're passionate about.
It's a utilitarian mindset that my worth only judge in terms of what it actually produces. So if there's a future in which I can't actually produce, then it's meaningless.
Right.
But we're virtue ethicists as Orthodox.
Right.
Like, the reason why we try to produce something, whether we accomplish it or not, is to produce virtue and become more than what we were.
Right. Amen.
So we're not think about how captivating utilitarianism is. Like, who cares Did you fight the good fight? Did you acquire the virtues through trying to produce stuff? You're not measured by what you produced and the money. You're measured by the struggle and the struggle that produced the virtues to get there. And that's who you are. So we got to reorientate our mindset away from everything we're talking about. Utilitarian is totally a modernist philosophy.
Modern project, another modern project. Exactly.
I'd be like, no, it's about virtue. We're talking in the class, and then we're talking at church today. Father Russell always talks about the Finnish concept of sisu. Sisu is basically defined as unnecessary struggle, to struggle well through unnecessary struggle. So a Finnish person could drive in on the snow-plowed road straight into the cabin, or they could park a mile away and hike in 3 feet of snow into the cabin. They'll take the sisu, the 3 miles out, the mile out, 3 feet of snow. Why? Why would an American mindset, you're like, why would you do something so stupid? Well, at least they have the intelligence and insight to be like, because it produces virtue and strength. So in the fasting period, fathers always, in every confession, to be honest, deacon your sisu. In the lines in the grocery store, take the longer line. Take the unnecessary struggle. Now, why would we do that? To make yourself stronger. Why do we lift weights and work out and put pain, right? To become more than what we were, to become stronger. And so that's the way, whether the physical outcome of money or like a business works or not is irrelevant. As long as it produces virtue and makes me stronger, I'll take the harder way. And we got to vision the whole world this way. I'll be like, I'll take it. I'll take it, Lord. I'll take the as bad as it can get. That's why the Lord says, if anyone wishes to be saved, take up your cross and follow me.
Right.
Take it up, man. Man up. Become like God.
And, one of the most memorable points that I have, the time that we were all in California together for the baptisms of our friends, our close friends. And then we spent that night over at your parents' house.
Yeah.
And you made a comment. We were standing outside on the back porch, and everybody was talking about their struggles. There was like 4 or 5 people that were like struggling with some pretty serious stuff. And you made a comment as like, well, that's why we're Orthodox Christians, is that we're just here to struggle together. And that's the point you're making, is like, embrace the struggle. Yep. The struggle is not something to shy away from. The struggle is to be embraced, and it's going to make you a better man.
Amen.
No matter what the outcome is. And I think that's part of the problem of Gen Z is, whatever it may be, it could be fitness, is you see these kids that are like 16, 17, 18 years old, they're taking steroids. And it's like, well, the point of working out isn't to look like, Ronnie Coleman when you're 18 years old. It's for the journey of actually developing the work ethic, working out, being consistent, living a healthy lifestyle. And everybody is so focused on outcome. Like, everybody's so focused on how much money does the video make, or what, playing the algorithm, or taking shortcuts. I'm gonna, I want to look jacked for my Instagram photos, so I'm gonna get on steroids at 18 years old and hammer my testosterone levels for the rest of my life. Like, why would you do that? But if you're so focused on a product, on an outcome, immediate reward, somehow it can be justified. But if you take the long approach, which is what theosis is about, but the Orthodox Church is the long middle road, it's way worth it. And it's going to make you a better person in the process. So, with that being said, let's hit some of these super chats. We got some questions. Cortica throws in a generous 20. Thank you so much. Interesting discussion as always, DPH. Well, thank you to Father Deacon Dr. Ananias for taking the time today and sharing his expertise with us. Aiden Clark throws in 10, says, hey fellas, great stream. Went to Divine Liturgy for the second time. Also stayed after to watch a wedding. Man, Orthodoxy is just beautiful. It absolutely is. Well, glory to God, Aiden. I'm glad that you are inquiring and attending some liturgies. That's fantastic. Octavian, sent in 10 over on your channel, says, thank you both for all the works you do. They're very edifying. Well, thank you, Octavian. God bless you, brother. OG2ENV became a COTEL crew member and gifted a COTEL crew membership. Thank you very much, brother. Orthodox Boomer Grandma said, I wish I could host a philosophy, quote, salon here at our place. That'd be pretty cool. Thank you, men. We might do a discussion group of Paul Kingsnorth's new book, Most Popular Level, to get Christian folks to come. Well, thank you so much, Alexandria. God bless you and the family. Really appreciate it. Pierre throws in two, says Karl Marx was a piece of work. Yeah, that was a fact. He's also, did you hear that he was incredibly disgusting and smelled? Like he didn't like to take showers.
He looks like it.
He looks like, I know, but then you find out it's like, no, actually multiple people wrote how much he smelled because he didn't like to shower. It's like, or bathe then. I don't know if they had showers, but bathe. He didn't like to bathe. So apparently the dude was incredibly disgusting. Makes sense with his worldview.
Yeah.
Both and throws in 5, says wise words from each of you gentlemen. Thanks. Casimir Freeman throws in 5. Thank you very much, Casimir. He says, was it wise to pogrom Orthodox Jews in 1800s, thus producing loss of faith in anti-Talmudic Bolshevism? Was it wise to grape and delete old believers?
I don't even understand that. Was it wise?
Is this some type of shot at Orthodoxy?
I think so.
He's saying we pogromed Orthodox Jews in the 18. Is he talking about? I assume he's talking about Russia. And
yeah,
I don't think the pogroms produced. I don't think pogroms produced Bolshevism per se. Bolshevism is built on really, the Marxian dialectic.
And who is raping the old believers? Like, what does that even?
Is he talking about Orthodox Christians?
Was it wise to grape and kill old believers? Who are you? First of all, you're referring to this to a specific group. So, like,
okay, so he clarified here. Let me pull up his comment. He said,
"It's not sanctioned by
not
the
a
church.
shot at Orthodoxy, but it's a shot against the people who were decisive in both actions."
Who were decisive?
But who graped and
who
killed
is the people though that did this? Yeah.
Like, which pogrom are you talking about? I think the Jews have been through about 109.
Is the famous phrase, they'll always tell you what happened to them and never why.
Mm-hmm. Like what I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Casimir, I'd love to engage in. I really just genuinely do not know how to respond or what exactly is being referenced. It sounds like he's talking, it's like an anti-Russian thing. Is he claiming that the Russian church killed old believers? I don't get it. Anyways, next one. Thank you, Casimir. God bless you. I'm not sure exactly the question. Another one sent in says, been watching DPH's and Jay's coverage of the New World Order literature. Something that has confused me is why the elite do what they do. I'm sure it's demonic at base, but for them, is it just for control? Father Deacon, you want to take the first stab at that?
I mean, I think we kind of hit. I do think they have. I'd like to say they're not at the kind of lower levels, ideological. I think they kind of have a lot of them subscribe to a certain kind of ideology, even religious mindset. But again, yeah, of course, power. So I think there's multiple elements of kind of domination we kind of went through. Once truth is dead, it's in terms of control. But there's always an ideology that kind of justifies that. And so, and it's demonic. So all three of those.
Yeah, I would argue that anybody who's moving or in line with the New World Order, however you define that, technocracy, global communism, whatever nomenclature you want to use, it ultimately is demonic. And whether, the Rothschild family or Prince Andrews is openly, explicitly satanic or not, the idea from an Orthodox perspective is that through their free will, they've chose to neglect the uncreated energies of God and are filled with the absence of. So any decision they make is going to be inspired by a sort of demonic movement. And so their own pride, their own greed, their own, and something to keep in mind is if you have hundreds of billions of dollars, you can buy, if you have $1 billion, you can basically buy anything you want. What would motivate you then? Probably power over people. Like if you're not rooted in some type of traditional framework, let's say in Orthodox Christianity or something, and you're a kind of modern person, you have billions of dollars, and there really is no limit to what you're, pushing towards. Eventually, it's going to lead to like subjugation and control over people. That's why so many of these really rich people get into like sex trafficking and like buying actual people. And so what's that driven by? Is it that they're openly satanic? Maybe. Sometimes it's just that they're filled with the passions, which displace the energies of God. And in a sense, they are a vessel for a demon. Maybe they're not as, there's a spectrum here. We talked about demon possession in previous stream. There's a spectrum in the Orthodox Church. It's not like you do one thing and all of a sudden you're fully controlled by a demon. There's multiple instances where you say yes to them. And I would assume many of these people have said yes to the devil, the logismy, the tempestuous thoughts that come in our brain. Why is it that adultery and weird sexual fetishes is so common amongst these people? Because they're constantly trying to get a higher high. Eventually, sometimes it's adrenochrome. So like there's definitely a spiritual basis for all this. And I think it's all demonic, whether the person engaging is explicitly recognizing, like Maria Abramovich, she's kind of openly satanic. Not all of them are so explicit about their Satanism, but anybody that is moving towards that general framework is compelled by the same powers. That'd be my response. This is a question that came in over on your channel, one of two. I think part of the problem today is some in the Christian coalition wing of the Republican Party hitched their wagon to Trump. I think he's sending another one in for your channel, but it hasn't come in yet. What do you think about people, the Christian coalition supporting Trump? We've kind of hit on this previously in some of our streams.
It's complicated. The Christian coalition is divided. Like there's people that view Trump as a messianic figure that are at a cult. That's definitely true. I think generally the values of the right and conservatism line obviously much more up with Christianity than the left does. And so people are going to vote for those in the Republican Party. And then I think you have a third group, the Christian coalition, that don't think Trump's necessarily a good person. They're probably skeptical, don't even understand, but they're just like, I don't want to go into World War III, and I'm tired of my nation being destroyed by the left. The left has gotten so out of control and weaponized migration that they were like, this is the only place that we had to go. So, it's a varied group among people who voted for Trump.
Right. I've seen this multiple times in the comments or the chats of some of my streams is they say voting for the lesser of two evils is still evil. And I would retort that actually that is exactly what St. Paisios said for people to do, is to vote for the lesser of two evils. So I would say, at least from St. Paisios, that doesn't mean you're contributing to the evil. In fact, it means you're trying to lessen the spread of it in whatever country or polis that you're able to participate in politically. But yeah, Trump's very flawed. If there was a re-election between Harris and Trump's still the better option. But yeah, you're never going to get. I mean, we're literally in a Masonic Protestant Enlightenment project right now. Yeah. Like, you're not going to get, the government.
I would say it's very Protestant to be like, well, they're both bad, and so I opt out of politics. I'm like, that's puritanical Puritanism. That's a Protestant crazy sect that I don't get involved. I don't touch things that are bad. And that's why St. Paisios said, there's both like a combination of the principle ideological, like obviously you can't vote for a platform that wants to mutilate children and molest them and create an abortion holocaust and, antinatalism, pro-death, Malthusian death cult. And at the same time, like among, like you said, the lesser of two evils, you have to basically say, well, I still have to be practical. I need to be politically involved in a way that serves Christians the best. So I have more, I don't know if I say more, I have disdain for the people who are like, I don't vote. And I'm like, I think they're actually just as evil, maybe a little bit less than those who vote for like very evil stuff. I'm like, you're part of the problem.
Okay, I see the number 2 now. It was just a comment over on your channel. He says, whenever Trump or Christian coalition leader was told something like it's different than in the time of Christ, we can't be Christ-like. Well, again, Dave, forgive me. I don't exactly, obviously, I don't know who you are or where you're coming from. I would say that, are you criticizing the idea that that the time is different to be Christ-like and to vote for Trump is to not be Christ-like? Because I would argue that we're not pacifists, and I always get worried, and I don't know your intentions, Dave, but when everybody says, when everybody starts talking about Christ-like regarding politics, it tends to come with some type of passivism or some type of tolerance that I don't think, from my reading of Byzantine history, we're right here, the history of the Byzantine Empire, that wasn't what I was seeing there. The goal was to make sure that the culture itself reflected Christ as much as possible. And they took extreme measures that maybe we wouldn't take today. I mean, they kicked people out. They cut people's hands off. They cut their tongues out based on things they said. But the whole goal was to make sure that that social canopy that we talked about earlier was never eroded or never split, that everybody understood what the empire stood for. I think that's actually a good thing. Maybe the methods might be different in the 21st century, but I think political vengeance. Go ahead.
I think it's an error. It comes up in ethics, and it's something called ethical monism and absolutism, that like rules are applied everywhere in the same way at the same degree. So there are principles of what it's to be Christ-like. That might look Christ-like, might be executing somebody or blowing their brains out when they're coming in to grape your family. Like that, I would argue that's Christ-like, that there's a general principle. It's like, well, Christ never did that, but the context and the situation differs, right? There's no one rule that's applied in the same way everywhere at all times and all. So that's why we acquire the phronema of the church. And if you want to know what the phronema of the church is, just like you said, you look like there are different times that, like, by our standards that you would look at, you would think that's extremely harsh and not Christ-like. But it's like, it's literally sanctioned by Christ and codified in Justinian law.
Right.
That, like, these people have an abortion, executed. If you had an abortion, you'd be executed. No, I'm not saying we could do that in our culture, right? But that's part of the principle of what it's to be Christ-like, it's not an absolute or ethical monism. It's a principle that when applied, and think about this is exactly the way the priest works, right? He has canons, he has rules, objective rules. So this doesn't mean it's subjective, it's objective. How the priest applies that to the one in confession differs. Sometimes he has to apply it harsher, he has to apply it in different ways, sometimes he lessens it, but the general rule still applies, and it's actually Christ-like. But like, I'm extremely suspicious. It's typically an effeminate Protestant modernist thing to be like Christ-like. This isn't Christ-like. You just don't see that kind of argumentation and verbiage in the history of the church. Like, you do see it emerge out of exactly what we talked about. Now that there isn't really any truth, right? You have to weaponize words and emotionalism, be like, oh, well, Christ has got to be meek. He's got to be this hippie person. It's this emotionalism that's applied in this way everywhere at all times. But I mean, if we think about, like I've argued this about the death penalty is love. It is an act of love, the same way that the death penalty was instituted upon Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that they may repent and the evil may not become eternal. It's actually a gracious, loving thing that somebody be given an actual sentence that you only have this much time to live, and you've got to now you've got a chance to repent, turn around, because the devil's distraction, the biggest distraction and temptation is you always have more time. Going back to why does St. Paul says redeem the time? So I'm extremely suspicious of this kind of language of Christ-like.
He did clarify and say, I'm not a pacifist, but some Trump supporters probably think Christ lived in a simpler time.
I'm still not getting it. I'm just not getting it.
I'm not sure what the simpler time has to be with the premise about voting for Trump. I don't know. I would say just for the mimetic value itself and the shift of the Overton window, it's been well worth it. Despite the dispensationalists, despite the Zionism, despite some of the failed promises, I mean, the cultural shift and the energy that millennials and Gen Z have on the right wing now, I think that's worth it in and of itself, because that's going to create a reverberation for the next generation.
Yeah, and I always say too, I'm a pro-Trump person. I'm like, take the wins.
Yeah, I have a lot of criticisms of Trump.
We have a lot of criticisms of Trump. So I'm like, take the wins.
Exactly.
Like, he does something
you want
good,
no wins at all, or some wins in the veneer of Christianity, and at least kind of maintaining something of semblance. But no, I get all the criticisms of Trump. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, what are the options? And do you want like a Mike Johnson Christian from Mississippi, or do you want like a braggadocious megalomaniac Donald Trump that when Netanyahu went back on his word, he's like, all right, that's the end. Turkey's now going to be the military guard for Gaza and the West Bank. Which one would you rather have? I mean, I'd rather have the man that's kind of an egomaniac that if he gets crossed, he actually does something different.
Yeah. Good point.
So, and last one for me over on Dono Chat, Spencer throws in $5. Thank you very much, Spencer. He says, I attended a parish in Dallas, and my priest announced that we've have 32 new catechumens in the past 4 weeks. Holy crap. 4 Sundays and you got 32 new catechumens. I'm still in school and would like some of my classmates to come to my church. What's the best approach to do so? What would be your method to get classmates, if you're an undergrad college student, to go to your Orthodox church?
I figured this out the other day. I think we Orthodox needed to do more social events outside of liturgical settings.
Yes, I would totally agree with that.
We do, it was a lot easier ones in Southern California, especially for all you single people. We do the young adult league, and we would do theology on tap, bingo night, like, bowling, where young people could meet. Up here, it's a bit harder because, there's hardly any people in Montana. But I do, like Wednesday night, we're having Orthodox movie night. We do music bingo night sometimes at like one of the breweries. We do obviously the catechesis and continued education. I'm totally thinking about events outside of liturgy as well. Why?
Right.
Because guess what? That's not only is it good for us to stay in that we're not this kind of like American Protestant idea of like, well, there's myself, my religious self that I do on liturgy, and then everything in my secular life. I want the liturgical life to spill out into everything that we do. That's one of the reasons why I do that. But furthermore, isn't it much easier and more inviting and be like, hey, why don't you come to an Orthodox movie night? Or, hey, we're going to all meet up for an music bingo night. They meet the people, and guess what they think? Hey, these people are actually kind of cool.
Right. I'll tell you, a perfect example is our men's group at my little parish. Is we got guys that we invited to our men's group to go shoot guns. We went to a shooting range. They came, they saw, a bunch of normal guys like guns. I like guns. Yeah. We talk about guns. We talk about man stuff. And all of a sudden they're like, man, yeah, I want to come to liturgy. Well, and then they hang out in fellowship. Now they're part of the church.
Because it's just too weird. I've seen parishioners like, oh, I'm talking to a person at my work and I invited them to my church. I'm like, it's weird. Hey, come to my weird church, right? That
yeah, you probably never heard of it, and we're not Orthodox Jews, but you should come and check it out.
Like, it's going to be really, really hard. So I think more things that we saturate with Orthodox community outside of the liturgy and the services, where people, I mean, even think about this. Greek fest, Serb fest, Romanian fest, stuff like that plays up on that, right? They have it at the church, but they're doing what? They're doing stuff that people can relate to. Oh, music and
community outreach through
people
culture.
are really chill and cool.
Yeah.
Oh, they're offering a tour. Maybe I'll go in. Why do they go in?
Ball's great at that Greek church.
Yeah, what? So, I mean, I think that's the way. I think that we need to start organizing more community social events is kind of a transition to be like, we're actually really cool people. You'll get to kind of understand how we think and work, and be like, that'll get the people the interest. But I mean, it's really hard just to have a conversation, even if you've been talking theology with somebody, to be like, hey, why don't you come to a service?
Right. They already have to be interested to come to the services. Yeah. But to the point that Spencer was making, if your church has 32 new catechumens, I would imagine most of them are younger, maybe not. But if that's the case, it sounds like you already have a big church. When I was in Southern California, actually during the time we did those baptisms, Father Deacon, I went to a youth meeting with Dr. Michael Moeller. Was it St. Mark's or something? It was an Orthodox church in LA.
St. Mark's in Torrance.
Yes, that's Torrance. It. And they had
Father John Mafflin's
parish. They probably had 30 or 40 people between the ages of 18 and 35, 40. And they just hung out. The priest had basically a group discussion on theology. Before that, they had a Vesper service, and then they had some alcoholic beverages. They had non-alcoholic beverages. They had food, and you just hung out for 2 hours with other people your age. That would be a fantastic opportunity to invite non-Orthodox people.
Yep.
Exactly. They get to talk with the priest. One, they find out, oh, the priest is kind of normal. He's wearing his cassock. It's intimidating if you're not Orthodox to see a priest and like engage with them. I felt that way when I first started going. And then they were able to, they can say nothing for the first hour, and maybe they can see a little bit of a Vesper service, or maybe not even go to the Vespers or join afterwards. And then they see a priest talking, they see a community of young people talking seriously about Christ, but it's very warm. It's not maybe what they think it is. And then they have a social community for 2 hours. I was blown away because I had never been to a church that had such a thriving group of younger people that, I mean, everybody knew each other. Some people were at different churches, but they always knew when that church's youth sector got together that they would go. Legitimately 40 some people, younger people, men and women. It wasn't just it was majority men, but I'd say at least 15 to 20 girls that were there. I mean, it's like, that's what we need more of. So Spencer, speak to your priest, ask if, many churches already have a men's group. We have a men's group. See if there's a men's group. If there is, invite a friend to the men's group. If they have a youth sector where they get together and they do things together, like invite a friend there. I think also we do need more. Now, I just talked about men's group, and I do love the men's group. In my academy, Logos Academy, is only for men, but we also need environments where men and women interact. We need, that's why I thought the St. Mark's in LA was so great, because of how many young women were there too that were Orthodox. Now, LA is obviously a much bigger city, and maybe it's because they can pull so many people, but at least it's a model for the future, especially with churches that are experiencing this much growth.
I mean, Dallas has tons of parishes too. That's one thing I do miss about Southern California, is that working with all those youth and all the parishes and stuff like that, it was a lot easier to kind of like invite people who weren't Orthodox, kind of matchmake, and people meet, young girls, young guys. But like, I would think Dallas is an ideal city, how big it is and how many parishes, that you could definitely do something like that.
Yeah. So that'd be my suggestion, is talk with your priest and get involved in, as Father Deacon said, all these extracurricular things outside the liturgical services, and invite your friends to that. And if they are doing men's group stuff, like we go to a pizza place and drink beer. Like we do that every like 4 months or so for the men's group. Just so it's just free flowing conversation. You sit next to a different person each time, but it's just men. That's a perfect thing to invite a buddy to. And they just get to have some pizza, maybe have a beer or two, talk with other people. You get into really deep, interesting points of conversation. They're like, wow, that was actually pretty cool. You guys talk about this stuff after church every Sunday at fellowship? It's like, yeah, that's literally what we do. Oh man. Okay. Well, that's cool. My Protestant church, we just, do the rock band and then everybody leaves. It's like, yeah, well, come out here. We have a community.
Yep.
So
yep, that's it.
All right. Just double checking. That looks like it's it for me. Is there any other super chat somebody sent into you want to address before we hop off?
Let me see. Sorry for squinting my eyes. I'm going blind. That is it. That's too bad for all of you guys that you have no questions.
I know. We literally talked about the history of philosophy, and nobody has any thoughts or comments on philosophy.
You're like my students in college. Like we do like a fantastic. Nobody has any question. We just finished Problem of Evil Theodicy, and it was intense. I actually got a bit teary-eyed and like shed some tears, and like it was a really intense lecture. And of course, I forgot to record it. It was the one lecture I always tell them, I'm like, make sure I record these things, because we had some sports ball players out. And at the end, I'm like, of course, it's always some of the best ones you forget to record. Right. But I'd ask them the same question. I'm like, nobody has any, like, you have no problem of evil anymore. Like that lecture just solved it for you. I'm like, come on. But it just, I mean, I think it's a lot of the stuff's pretty heavy. I was just kind of watching my students, and I'm like, I bet you're just kind of soaking it in. I'm like, don't ignore it though. Like, think about it, mull over it. So even if you guys don't have any questions, let these be logos spermaticas in your mind. Let them grow. Constantly think about, and that's one of the things about the good aspect of philosophy is it's reflexive and introspective. In a time and age when I just read, I think I brought this up to you, 85% of people don't introspect at any serious level.
That's unbelievable.
I
could see how easily people are distracted by technology, that they just don't sit in silence. That was one of the things I actually mentioned, maybe it was in fellowship at church or something. I forget who I was talking to, but it was the Logos Academy. It was during one of our meetings. I just been so busy for the last like 3 or 4 months, and I just had a car ride the other day where I just turned everything off. Normally, I'm always have like a YouTube video or something coming in, taking in information. I turned everything off and I just said the Jesus prayer over and over. About 20 minutes later, I just had like this feeling of like hope, confidence, stillness. I felt like I reconnected with like my interior voice. And I almost felt like there was so much going on in my head. I didn't even hear myself for a while. And I highly recommend people doing more of that. I saw Father Josiah Trenum recommended the exact same thing, is like find points to just sit in stillness and quietness, and just don't do anything. Like literally just sit there for a while. Like do not focus on and just watch what emerges. And maybe temptations that usually happens for the first 5 or 10 minutes. You get weird thoughts. You want to go do something. You realize, oh, there's an email I need to go do, or there's some. Just sit there. Just stop for 20, 30 minutes and just watch the interiority of yourself like become a little bit more silent. And all of a sudden you feel like you're connected with yourself more.
I'm blessed where, I had this experience a couple of years ago where I'm out in the middle and way back on the Blackfoot River in Grizzly Country, fly fishing. And there's not first of all, the city of Lincoln only has like 300 people. And then you're back way out. And it was absolute silence of mind. And the noises that you could hear were the ripples of the water, the squirrel running up the tree, the wind blowing the trees. And what was amazing is like I became in tune to every single sound, and I could smell the odors. I could hear stuff that was miles away, like a branch creaking and stuff like that. And all at once, though, so I wasn't distracted. I wasn't fragmented. I was seeing the ripples of the water and hearing like the squirrels and the breezes. And I just had this epiphany where I was like, I feel human. I'm like, actually, this is what a human being is actually supposed to feel like. And I haven't been being human.
Right.
I was just dialed in. You know what I mean? I was thinking straight. I was clear. I didn't have logosmoi running in my head of thoughts. And I was just like, and Father George Aquaro talked about, and Father Hans talked about this too, that your mind and nous are created to connect to the infinite. And what we do is we distract ourselves, and we do this kind of biofeedback loop. We're just like, that's the spiral of because you're designed that way. So it's just, you want to go in this infinite loop. And people who suffer from depression, one of the things that Father Hans would say is to get out in nature and start dialing in, be present to look at the color, look at the different shades, start focusing in on the lines of the leaf, the different things of the grass and stuff like that. Because what that will do is it'll break you out of your infinite biofeedback loop, and it'll put you into where you're actually supposed to be connected, which is the divine energies of God. It's silent. All your thoughts then are ordered, and you start to receive God's energies through his creation, and you reconstitute yourself as truly human. And that was the experience that I had. And, nature is really easy to do that. I think it's harder. I think it's good to, even when you're in the city, to try to find a place where you just shut everything off. It's just much harder in the city to be like, I'm going to sit in my room and be quiet. Right. Why? Because you have a computer right there. You have your phone here. When you're out in the woods, in the desert, like there is no TV. There's no more distraction. It makes it much easier. And that's why, even our Lord himself does what? He retreats to the desert. The saints go to the desert. It doesn't have to be a literal desert. It could be the mountains or something like that. But obviously the theological message is quiet. Like disconnect and go back into the silence of God's creation, which is the theme of Montana Connects here. Orthodoxy.
There you go. There you go. Nice plug. And to do a few more plugs, if you want to join us, again, Father Deacon and I, along with Jay Dyer, Metropolitan Jonah, and Father Vladimir, will be at the Athens and Jerusalem conference. The link to get your tickets are running out. I spoke with Jay the other day. Yeah. Most spots are already filled up, but get your tickets now. The link is in the video description. Just click the video description here on Church of the Eternal Logos. Click that link and get your tickets. Would love to meet anybody out there. They're in Palm Coast, Florida. So please join us if that's something you'd be interested in. Also, if you like these conversations, obviously we don't have Father Deacon Doctor all the time, but I have an academy just for men called the Logos Academy over on school.com, where we do private think tanks just on topics like this: philosophy, theology, masculine development, health and fitness. We just did a private Q&A with Dr. Mo Friday, where he gave us over 2 hours of just answering people's health questions, which are $250 to $350 consultations. We had Father Gabriel answer theological questions. A lot of people wanted to talk about Israel, but those are private Q&As that we do. So if you want to be part of that community, please join us over at school.com/Logos Academy. And if anybody's interested in reading my book, I'll be shipping out all of the books that have been purchased through my website this Monday. So anybody who's purchased, your book will be, if you don't already have it, it'll be in the mail tomorrow. Yeah, those are basically the things that I need to shill. Father Deacon, what can you shill?
Well, I was supposed to end it last Tuesday. I did this amazing university canvas course sale. It's a 3-unit, 16-week university course. It can we've had students actually transfer to colleges. So although it's not accredited itself yet, they are transferable upon signature of the deans. We've had many students do that. So I brought those 16-week courses down to amazing prices. $650 for a 16-week, 3-week course. That includes Monday office hours that usually you're guaranteed 1 hour, but it's usually 2-3 hours. And that's the best part of it. Free educational software forever. Access to this, like the lectures, graded quizzes, exams, tutoring, for $650, which is an amazing deal. You can bundle those. That was the great deal. Get 2 of those, $850 courses for only $900, or 3 for $1,050. And we had a huge explosion. We have the largest registration of students that I've had for the Patristic Faith Canvas courses. And so that's a benefit to you guys, because the more people that are in the classes, as far as like discussions and things that we do, you get more out of that. You can go at your own pace. You could, once you purchase it, you could take it next year or something like that. You have access to it forever. And so in light of just how successful this was, I've decided to keep that sale up. So if anybody's interested in that, you can go to Patristic Faith on the shop and my Shopify and purchase those. And we're off to a great start. We have Philosophy of Science as a new course built out.
Oh, cool.
It's the first time I've done this for, outside of in person at Carroll College. We have Introduction to Ethics, and then all the usual logic, intro to philosophy, and what was the other course? Epistemology. So that's my shill. But we're really excited. We just kicked off the semester, and so we're really excited about this. Great deal. Ask anybody who's taking the course. They continue to take more courses, and they never regretted it. So if you're interested, go check out Patristic Faith. Go under what is it? What did I say? Shop. And you'll find us there.
Yeah, post that link.
Yeah.
Last question that somebody sent is Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy good? I would argue, Ortho Bro James, I'm curious what FDA's opinion about that is. If you're looking for books that basically, if you want to read the history of Western philosophy, I would argue you really can't go wrong with Copleston's 11-part series. That's what this is right here.
Yeah.
I would highly get this. Do not get Bertrand Russell's Western philosophy book. It can be a little bit expensive, so if you want to get one at a time, but if you have the money, this is an investment. Just buy all 11 series. You have from ancient philosophy to logical positivism and existentialism. It basically takes you to the mid 20th century, and basically you'll be up to date on most of what we talked about. And I think he does a great objective overview of this stuff. It's not really his commentary. He's really just kind of laying out what people think and how it's developed. So if you're interested in philosophy, because I would say one of the difficulties with philosophy is it's kind of, if you didn't take courses in undergrad or you've studied it at university, it's kind of hard to get into for the average person. And so I would recommend get that book series if you want. And also for me, I learned by taking notes. I write things out. So I have a little notebook. This is just for philosophy. So you can see, like, I have Kant's philosophy. You move it forward, it's after Hegel, Whitehead's philosophy. And that's just how I do it, is I will just dive into somebody and I will just fill out what I would consider a cheat sheet study guide, so that just like for a stream like today, I can just open it up, go to logical positivism and see what I wrote down and be like, oh, okay. Oh yeah, I remember that. I forgot about that. And so I would argue this was the method that I took. I only took one philosophy course technically at university, but because of what I was doing, obviously you're reading a lot of these people and you read a lot of theorists. So I'm probably, Father Deacon's probably read a lot more of philosophy, and I probably read a lot more theory of religion or sociology or something like this. It's a little bit different, but it's kind of in the same wheelhouse. So read, and then there's so many good lectures. Like, was it Arthur Holmes from the Wheaton College? Is it Wheaton College, the Protestant college that has they have like his literally intro to philosophy, 2-semester courses, all lectures posted. Just watch those and take notes as if he's your professor. And then if you want to, like for me, I think that would be, do that, get your notes down, and then you can read Copleston and you'll actually understand everything that he's talking about.
That's a good approach. Or just pull up AI and just have
yeah, have AI do it for you. The problem is you won't
play Western man.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of people are doing, and they're confusing an AI prompt with actually knowing something. And it's like, again, do what's difficult. If you take anything from today, especially the end of today's stream, is do the difficult thing, and actually being able to grok it and articulate it. That's huge. And I think I know for Father Deacon, he'd probably agree with this, being a lecturer and a professor, but me also doing all these live streams, is that forcing yourself to articulate it to somebody else demands that I actually have to know what I'm talking about. Because if I do not know anything I'm talking about and I come on here and do a live stream, you will know immediately. And so I think that's one of the things that so many people I've talked to that are lecturers say. One of the beauties about lecturing is that it keeps me sharp, because I have to go through it. I have to sometimes reread primary sources, deal with people's ideas. So, if you're able to find a conversation partner, if you're interested in this, again, that's why the Logos Academy is beneficial, is it forces you to then articulate the things that you think you learn. And maybe you say something that's totally whack and somebody's like, hey, what are you talking about? Like Descartes' not an empiricist. What are you talking about? And then you're like, oh yeah, I misunderstood that. I misphrased. And it just sharpens you. So finding somebody that, like, conversation partners, that's one of the benefits of actually being in university. Like Father Deacon has colleagues that can be conversation partners, but it's difficult, especially if you're dealing with philosophy, to find a conversation partner. If you have one, that's great. that's kind of what my community is about. Is building a non-local community for people to talk about that type of stuff. But also, if you have specific questions, I'm sure Father Deacon, you could reach out to him or sign up for his courses. Like I said, Father's courses, finding stuff online, like general intro stuff, that'd be the best way to go. And then once you get the foundational stuff, now you can actually read. Because unless you're like really above average IQ, I found a lot of people cannot just read. Like one guy was wanting to get in philosophy. He's like, yeah, I picked up Kant. I'm like, bro, like you're not going to be able to read Kant or Hegel, man. You're just not going to know what's going on. You're not going to know what you're reading. So you got to take baby steps. It's like reading The Ladder of Divine Ascent, and you're an inquirer catechumen. It's like, bro, you're not there. Just drop the philokalia. All right. You're not there right now. Like, just read some Lives of the Saints. Same thing with philosophy. So any other comment, anything you want to say before we wrap up here, Father?
That's it. I mean, that's why we took that kind of historical approach as well, is that even if you did have the requisite IQ to read Kant, most people don't, or Hegel, or let alone like once you get into kind of analytic philosophy, and philosophy of language is extremely difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. First book I read is Wittgenstein. Like, no, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Frege and like, it's funny because I play this joke. Like, I actually found one of the best articles refuting nominalism. People are like, oh, I want to read it. And I'm like, you're not going to understand it. I'm like, I don't even think like 5% of PhDs in philosophy could understand it. I'm like, it's actually really, really difficult. So everybody's like, of course, it just intrigued them. They were like, well, I want to see it. I'm like, I'm telling you, you're like, it's going to be gobbledygook. I'm like, all right. And it's just like when you tell somebody like you can't read this, of course they want to read it more. And I sent it to people and they were like, oh my God. I'm like, right. I'm like, I told you. It took me forever to get through it. I'm like, I'm really good at this stuff. I'm a PhD in this, and I'm like, it's just this second order logic stuff and symbolic logic. And I'm like, you're not going to understand it. But the other thing too is, suppose you could, obviously Kant's doesn't require that kind of logic and stuff like that, but it's obviously extremely difficult.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I read it in undergraduate, I thought I was a retard, and I found the smartest person in our class, and we read the Critique of Pure Reason. I'm like, did you understand that? He was like, no. I'm like, okay, so it's objectively difficult. Like, if I found the guy that ends up being our valedictorian couldn't even understand it upon the first read, I'm like, you guys are not going to get it. Let alone if you don't take the historical approach. So that's why we began with it. I'm like, Kant is a response to Hume, who's a response to his predecessors going all the way back to the pre-Socratic. So it's kind of why we did. Don't jump in. Do not jump in. Even if you had an extremely high IQ, you're still going to miss stuff and not understand it because you don't understand the historical context of. So that's one thing that's good about Copplestone, and what you were saying. Another ways to kind of grasp the kind of history of philosophy is not only is Copplestone kind of reduce these very difficult ideas to a fairly approachable way.
Yeah.
It's historical.
Yes.
So it's like, that's the best way to do it. It's the best way. Don't jump in with Descartes. Yeah.
Chronological approach to philosophy is by far the best. I mean, just like the document, you saw how every little period we demarcated, the pre-Socratics to Socrates to Plato and Aristotle, they're all building on each other. Even in the church, and basically a 1200 period where we're not doing philosophy, we're doing theology, but yeah, we're using philosophical terms to explicate, to scholasticism. And what's scholasticism? Well, it's responding to the influence of Aristotle, now translated from the Arabs into Latin. And so it's like there's a ladder here, there's a mosaic. And I think that's where people that are like the Nietzscheans I've talked to, it's like okay, you've read Nietzsche. Like, are you familiar with the history of ideas? Are you familiar with like where he fits in the context of intellectual? Of course not. They hear Nietzsche, they think will of power, Ubermensch, anti-Christianity, weak slave morality, and it's like, bam, I got a bat to now be edgy. And it's like, yeah, but that's really easy to shoot down. You know, it's like being a Nietzschean in the 21st century isn't actually that cool. Only if you're not familiar with like where we're at, do you think, oh, wow, that's really cutting edge. It's like, no, bro, been there, done that. So, all right.
Yeah. And the last thing I would add too is
go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, you don't have to study philosophy to be Orthodox. Like,
no. Oh, that's a great
ask
point.
us questions that, like, look, we do philosophy. I'm a professional philosopher. Like, that's where God threw me in the trenches for whatever reason, in the filth cesspool of academia. It was just where I got to do my work. Okay, I'm not complaining. I'm grateful for it, but I'm not a philosopher. I'm a baptized Orthodox Christian and son of God. I do philosophy on the side. So whatever our talents or wherever God puts us, like, you make the best of it. But like, you don't have to do philosophy to be Orthodox, to understand Orthodoxy any more than you have to learn how to be a cook or a cantor in the church to understand Orthodoxy. God puts us where we're at, given our talents, and you make the best of it. So that question does come up a lot. Like, do I have to learn all this? And it's like, no. But, you know, the philosopher, people who do study philosophy and philosophy religion like yourself, then we do have a duty to defend the faith. It's like, well, we've actually got some tools to actually smash the heretics and push them down. You might as well. And so, you know, it's just all different parts of the body. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear to everybody as we're ending. Like, no, it's not, you don't have to become a philosopher of religion to be a good Orthodox Christian.
No, absolutely. I think that's a huge point, because I think because of some of the debate and the conversation, the high level conversation that Orthodoxy has online by some of the apologists, people think that they have to apprehend everything that we're saying to become part of the church. And I would say that right there is a modern presupposition regarding rationalism. Like, no, we're pre-modern. You don't need to watch this stream or know anything that we're talking about to go to the liturgy and participate with Christ. That's the point. Again, that's where the pre-modern worldview participation's up here. Reason is down here. And so do not feel overwhelmed. I mean, I had a guy, an Orthodox Christian with Dr. Michael Moeller. He's going over peptides, hormones, different compounds, different supplements you can take. And somebody's like, oh, this is too much. The saints didn't have to do this. So okay, if it feels too much, then don't watch the stream. That's fine. But it's not unorthodox to talk about men's hormones and like peptides and ways that we can optimize our health either. So just find the middle ground. You don't need to optimize your health to be Orthodox. You don't need to hear, Dr. Mo talk about peptides or TRT to be Orthodox. You don't have to be super, macho masculine. Just go to the liturgy. But if you are interested in these things, and just to your point, I describe myself as an Orthodox Christian before I describe myself as a religious studies scholar. And that's to the exact point that you made, is I'm not defined. I'm defined by what I believe in my relationship to Christ, not by what I do. But what I do is tied with my purpose and my relationship with Christ. And I think that's what every man needs to find, is how do you take what excites you, your skill set, and your relationship in Christ, and blend those things together, and then fall in love with the journey and the work, like not the product. I some streams I take me 2 days to prepare for, and I get, hardly any viewers and very low engagement. It is what it is. But some people, then, I'll get an email from 2 or 3 people say, I love that stream. That was, that was incredibly helpful for me. So, would I've been able to help what is the point of what I'm doing? Right. And anybody ask, not just me, but ask yourself that. Ask yourself. And I think a man, in a sense, then is defined by what he does. for the world, but the way we should define ourselves as Orthodox Christians, our relationship with Christ, and then use that faith for what we do in the world and reflect Christ back from it. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that as well. I think that's a great point, is do not feel overwhelmed by all this philosophy stuff, and do not feel because you're I've talked with so many people that immediately want to start a YouTube channel and debate, and they're catechumens. It's like, guys, you don't need to debate the church. Like, just go to church. Just go to church. So, all right. That's going to do it for us, guys. Again,
great point to end with.
Yep. If you want to join Father Deacon and I and meet us in person and hear our speeches, I know Father Deacon's got a great speech lined up for Palm Coast, Florida. And just to clarify those dates, it's November 21st through the 22nd. That's a Saturday and Sunday, November 21st to the 22nd. I'm going to share that link again. The link is in the video description. Come be there with us in person. It's going to be a fantastic time. So many people are going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of cool information that's going to be presented by the various speakers. It's a great way for us to actually have fellowship in person and do what Father Deacon Doctor advocated for, which is actually do some extracurricular stuff outside the liturgy and be part of an Orthodox community and do things. So maybe you have a secular friend, bring them to the conference. That's another great way to introduce them to Orthodoxy. So sign up for FDA's courses. Did you share that link? Did you find the link?
Yeah, good point. Shop.
If not, you can you could put it as the pinned comment under your video, and we can point people to just go to your YouTube channel, Patristic Faith. And let me tag you in the title. I don't think I tagged you either.
My computer is freezing up or something.
Well, it's that Montana internet, dude. You need to upgrade to some high speed or something. No, they don't have fiber optic out there. They don't have cable. What are you on, Starlink?
It's probably because I'm running on it's probably not the internet. It's probably my stupid computer.
Your computer's filled with too many memes. It's dragging ass now.
PatristicFaith.com shop. Let's see if we can get it up. The other thing too is I don't know what's going on, dude. Don't sign up for my courses. I don't know what to do.
Okay, you heard it from the horse's mouth. And
whatever you do, don't it.
Now you're.
Isn't that what gets people? Don't read the articles. Too complicated. You'll never get through these courses. We can't even get the internet running up. The last thing you want to do is sign up for.
What do you have your wife on a hamster wheel to get the electricity going in the house?
I got 3 cats to do that. I have my own.
Is that what they're doing?
I can't get it to work. It won't. Just go on to Patristic Faith. I don't know what to say. You can find
go to patristicfaith.com. Sign up for his philosophy courses. God bless you all. Thank you so much for being here. And I will be back tomorrow, God willing, doing a stream on the theology of no self. We'll be doing a critique of the Buddhist Atman theology, and then looking at some contemporary people that are pushing that stuff in culture and talking why it's deleterious to believe in the lack of a soul and why it leads to the extinction of person and personhood. So that will be tomorrow. And then I'll be with Anthony Westgate Tuesday to record something for his channel, and hope to be back for another stream Thursday, because Wednesday we have a think tank over at the Logos Academy. So if you want to be a part of that, go sign up to the Logos Academy. But all right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, for being here. Thank you guys for all the support, and I will see you all in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.